Good morning and thank you for joining us. My name is Reagan Bissonnette and I am the Executive Director of the Northeast Resource Recovery Association. Welcome to day one of NRRA's Recycling with Results Conference. It's great to have you here. It is an understatement to say that the past year has been a challenging one, and I know it's impacted everyone here in different ways. And we at NRRA are particularly grateful for the work of our solid waste operators for continuing to provide essential services of managing solid waste and recycling during the pandemic. As I shared in an op-ed in May of last year, in the early days of the pandemic, as businesses and schools shut down, we quickly learned that solid waste operators were among our key essential workers. And managing people's trash and recycling is only a small part of what solid waste operators do every day. They cultivate the social gathering spot that is your local transfer station. They prioritize the environment through responsible and sustainable recycling and reuse. They work in all kinds of weather throughout the year, and they are doing incredible work to support our communities during this challenging time. And let's be honest, solid waste operators are nothing if not resourceful and creative. After the initial uncertainty in the early days of the pandemic, we held a hugely popular webinar with Dr. Ben Loughlin about best management practices for recycling facilities during COVID-19. Over 300 people joined us live and over 300 more watched the recording afterwards. Armed with this knowledge, solid waste operators quickly adapted to make recycling safer for residents and operators. Common changes we saw at transfer stations included increased sanitation, buildings closed to the public, reducing flow of traffic, closing swap shops, and modifying practices for accepting money to reduce contact. And of course, wearing masks, gloves, and changes to allow for social distancing. So I wanted to be sure to take the time to say thank you to our solid waste operators here today. I would also like to recognize and thank NRRA's vendors, who were largely able to continue operating during the pandemic to ensure our communities could continue to recycle and reduce their waste throughout the pandemic. And I would like to thank the NRRA staff for pivoting, as we call it, throughout this past year to continue serving our members. Now, as you may know, the Northeast Resource Recovery Association is a unique recycling nonprofit. Founded in New Hampshire 40 years ago, we enable municipalities throughout New England to manage their own recycling programs. Today, we have over 400 members throughout New England, and we achieve our mission of partnering with municipalities to make recycling strong through economic and environmentally sound solutions in two key ways. First, we're one of only a handful of nonprofits in the country that directly connects municipalities with companies that wish to acquire their residential recyclables. We provide strength in numbers for our members because the more members who participate with us, the more favorable terms we can negotiate on our members' behalf. Last year, we returned over $1.8 million to our members from the sale of their recyclables. We also allow our members to purchase recycling equipment at discounted rates, including storage containers, trailers, and baling wire plus compost bins. We have relationships with a range of reputable, environmentally responsible vendors, so we can serve as a one-stop shop for our municipal members' recycling needs. Our programs include recycling scrap metal, containers, fibers, electronics, propane tanks, tires, batteries, and more. The second key way we advance our mission is by providing educational programs and hands-on technical assistance geared towards solid waste operators. This includes monthly member operations marketing meetings where operators can learn about the latest recycling market pricing, hear special presentations on timely topics, and share information with one another. We also educate the next generation about recycling and waste reduction through our school recycling club. Our annual recycling conference is also an important part of our educational services. Last year, we canceled our May conference and instead held what was, in retrospect, an ambitious summer webinar series to make available many of the workshops that would have been held at our conference. And this year, while we certainly missed the opportunity to gather in person, which we would prefer, we're grateful to have the ability to gather with you all remotely. Today's conference is designed to share with you speakers who will address a range of topics relevant to keeping municipal recycling financially strong and environmentally sound in keeping with our mission. So a virtual conference brings with us a new way of connecting, and I'd like to cover a few logistics for today's conference. Attendees will be muted throughout the conference. This conference is being recorded, and the recording will be made available to you next week. And that's one of the benefits of doing a remote conference. All attendees will also receive a certificate of attendance following the conference. Now, if you cannot hear the presenters' voices, in which case my verbal explanation right now is probably not terribly helpful to you, please click the audio arrow in your control panel and choose computer audio. If that does not work, select the phone call option and follow the directions. We hope that you will all ask questions, and our presenters will do their best to answer them as time allows. Click on the question block in the control panel and type in your questions there. And please do keep your questions short and to the point. Now, I'd like to take some time to recognize our sponsors and supporters for this conference. Thanks to the generosity of our sponsors, we were able to offer this year's virtual conference for free to our members, and for a reasonable price for those of you who are not yet members. And I must admit, we were really blown away by the generous response that we received to our invitations to sponsor our conference this year. So I'd like to take the time to tell you a little bit more about those sponsors. First, I'd like to recognize our diamond sponsor, New Hampshire the Beautiful. New Hampshire the Beautiful is a nonprofit supported by members of the New Hampshire Beverage Association, the Beverage Distributors of New Hampshire Association, and the New Hampshire Grocers Association. This collaborative effort by food and beverage companies has developed comprehensive programs to address litter issues, recycling challenges, environmental awareness, and education. New Hampshire the Beautiful accomplishes these goals by offering municipal recycling grants and signs, anti-litter programs, and technical assistance to recycling programs in New Hampshire. And New Hampshire communities are eligible to apply for funding to assist with the purchase of recycling equipment. This includes monies to purchase curbside collection bins, balers, crushers, roll-off containers, and other equipment that will help a community achieve higher diversion rates. And that's what we're all aiming for. New Hampshire the Beautiful has been a longtime supporter of our education and technical assistance programs to support recycling for New Hampshire municipalities, as well as our school recycling club. And we are grateful for their support. We encourage you to learn more about our sponsors by visiting the virtual exhibit hall on our website. Our Diamond, Platinum, and Gold sponsors also have virtual exhibit booths there with more information about their work. Next, I'd like to recognize our Platinum sponsor, the Glass Packaging Institute. The Glass Packaging Institute is a trade association representing the North American glass container industry. On behalf of glass container manufacturers and their supply chain partners, GPI promotes glass as the optimal packaging choice, advances environmental and recycling policies, advocates industry standards, and educates packaging professionals. I encourage you to check out their new educational flyer called Questions Municipal Recycling Leaders Should Ask About Glass Recycling, which is available through their virtual exhibit booth. And next, I'd like to thank our gold sponsors, Harding Metals, Schnitzer, Interstate Refrigerant Recovery, Good Point Recycling, and Win Waste Innovations, formerly Wheelabrator. The first four are all NRRA vendors, and we appreciate the support of all our gold sponsors. And we are fortunate to have 11 silver sponsors supporting our conference this year. I won't read all their names here, but we are very grateful for their support. And then similarly, we thank our numerous conference supporters. And that will bring us up to our first of 3 workshops today. And as you can see from the conference agenda, which has been shared in the chat, we are fortunate to have a great lineup of speakers today. Many of them are seasoned solid waste operators that we personally invited to join us. We'll start with engaging residents with municipal recycling, then discuss waste reduction strategies, and we'll end the day briefly touring NRRA's new website, and then learn about recycling safely during COVID-19. After each hour-long session, will take a 10 to 15-minute break because, well, look, you know, it's not ideal to sit in front of a computer for 4 hours straight.
Good morning, everybody. So I am going to go over a whole bunch of things that I have been working on over the past, I don't know, it's probably been 17 years now regarding recycling. So it's a lot of information crammed into hopefully my 10-minute window. But the idea is just to spark some interest for you guys on how to engage your residents with municipal recycling. Oops, let's see. So these are the topics that we're going to cover. So we're going to talk first about your recycling goal. So everyone has a different recycling goal, and what I'm going to do is talk about my goals that were in Goffstown and my goals in Gilford to kind of show you the different focuses that I had regarding recycling. Then we're going to get into creating a slogan. I feel like that's something that kind of helps send home your recycling message. So we'll talk about some ideas for that. Another thing I'll explain is to create a simple web link and email. Again, a way to create easy access for your residents who have questions, want to look up information that you've posted. I find creating that information, a quick link, makes it easy for your residents to find all of this stuff. Then we're going to talk about designing and creating public info, which I have lots of examples for you. And then lastly, we're going to talk about how to get that information out into the community. So defining a recycling goal. So what is your issue in your town? So for us, we had an issue in Goffstown with contamination. We had single stream, and as you can see on the left here, this was a picture of our single stream load that was extremely contaminated, and we had to focus on cleaning that up. Excuse me. You may just want to be focusing on increasing your participation or upping your recycling numbers. For us here in Gilford, we were opening a brand new facility, and so we had to educate the public on a whole new process, which I'll talk about. Maybe you're trying to fund and approve a new facility, or maybe you're just trying to save money and reduce budget. So the first step is to define what your focus wants to be. And again, this focus can change over the years, but you need to decide, you know, what is your focus going to be when you get started. So again, as I said, in Goffstown, we had a contaminated issue. We had single stream curbside barrel pickups. So that was also kind of a different challenge. And we had increasing prices. And in Gilford, we opened a brand new facility where in the past residents went over to Laconia and they brought all their municipal waste there, their trash, and their recycling was optional, and there was single stream recycling here at Gilford. But it wasn't being, you know, I would say, managed very well with contamination and things like that. There wasn't a lot of education to clean it up. So they were seeing high contamination and their prices went through the roof. So over the years, they decided to fund a new facility. And so when I got here, the facility was 90% built, and my job was to get it open, educate the residents on the facility, how it was going to work. We were making recycling mandatory now, and it was all at this facility. And so that was my goal there. So two totally different, you know, focuses in each town. So as I said, one of the things I think works really well is creating a slogan. So our slogan in both towns for us, because I just took the slogan I had in Goffstown because it worked really well, is the one on the left, which is know the rules, recycle right. So that was something we came up with, and we decided to go with it in Goffstown, and it worked really well. So we've been using that here in Gilford as well. But these were just some other ideas that I found. You actually can just go online and, you know, Google ideas and come up with stuff. But I think it's kind of nice to have a simple slogan that you use, and then you can use that at the bottom of all your information that you're sending out. So these are just some other ideas, you know, eat, sleep, recycle, or, you know, these hands recycle. So just different ideas for you guys. But like I said, we use the one up on the left-hand side. So the simple web link or email. So this is something I did in both towns. We did essentially took the recycle right phrase, and we created a quick link. So you would go to our website, you would just type in guilfordnh.org/recycle right. And same thing in Goffstown, it will be goffstownnh.gov/recycle right. And we put that information, as you can see on the bottom here, on the bottom of our flyers, we would put our web link, we would put an email address. So for both towns, again, the email address was recycle@guilfordnh.org or recycle@goffstownnh.gov. So we have that information on the bottom of all of our flyers over here. This was a bumper sticker that we made that we put on our town vehicles. So again, it's just trying to get the message out there so when people have a question, they know where to go. These red signs in the middle were A-frame signs that we put up when we were opening our new facility to catch people's attention. And again, it had our website on it where they could find all of the information. So then you get to, what some people feel is the hard part and a little overwhelming, which is designing and creating, your public information. And what I'd say is that, don't feel like you have to do this, all yourself. There's so much information already out there, which I'll explain. When we first got started, we were using other resources already available from our vendor. That's how we got started. But there's so much information online that you can find, and you can take those ideas and then tweak them a little bit, to your needs for your community. So I would say do a lot of research online, and you can find lots of things. And on the bottom, these ideas down here are just instead of, if you're feeling overwhelmed with doing it, in Goffstown, we had college interns who helped us out. Maybe there's a local community college or a high school class, a marketing class or something that might be able to help you with creating some of these ideas we're going to talk about. Maybe you have an administrative assistant, or maybe you just have some people in your town that love recycling and want to help in any way they can. So, you want to tap into those resources and utilize them so that you're not feeling overwhelmed. And the other thing is start small. You just want to come up with like one flyer that you get out, and then again, the stuff I'm going to show you is over 17 years of stuff that we created between both towns. So you can start really small and you just keep adding to it as you come up with new information. So some ideas for public information, and we'll get into all the examples, is flyers. Those I find to be really helpful. I create flyers and I hand them out at town offices, at the transfer station. I put them online. You can make over time presentations that you give to schools. I've been at elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, because I find that teaching kids this information is great and they bring it home to their parents. So I totally utilize the younger generation to help spread our information. Those A-frame message boards, the red one that I showed you earlier, and I'll show you some other examples, those have been a really easy and simple way to promote recycling messages throughout the town. So we use those in Goffstown and we're using them here in Gilford, and all of them usually focus on a contamination issue and how to keep your recycling stream clean. So again, I have created tons of those, which I could share with anybody, and we just get them printed at a local print shop, and you put them on an A-frame sandwich board sign, and you move them around to messages. Another thing we've done is we've created door hangers. So this is an example of a door hanger we made, and this is actually a generic door hanger that is for any kind of work order that the Public Works Department does, but on it is the information, know the rules, recycle right. It's got a link to our Recycle Right page. So again, it's another generic way that we're getting information about our department out, but we have links on there to our Recycle Right information. The OOPS tags, I'll talk about that. That is with doing some auditing, the bumper stickers I mentioned, and if you have any recent or upcoming events, like any public information sessions. We did some at the library for people to teach them about the new facility in Gilford. So promoting information like that. So in Goffstown, the goal was to reduce contamination. So these were the steps that we did. We focused on educating our residents. Then we completed audits and we shared that data, and people were very interested in that. So we did audits with NRRA at our facility, and we went out and did barrel by barrel audits, just randomly picking audit barrels to check. And we gave that data back to the community, and it was very interesting, and people were very good at engaging. And here's some examples over here of all the very colorful and simple messaging signs. Again, I'm happy to share any of those with people, but they're really easy to do and you can move them around town. So they've worked great. So when I said I first started, I didn't have any information. So I went right to our vendor Casella back then, and Casella had great flyers that they had already made. And we took this information and we pushed this out into the community. So just to get started, like I said, we use these and we were putting them on, on Facebook, handing them out, sending them out via newsletters. I think I attached them to school newsletters to get them out. So, I didn't have anything created, but I found ways to get information out to start working on the issue before I had stuff created. Then we took that information and we made our own. So we made a little trifold flyer and just focused on some issues that we were having. Plastic bags was the biggest thing. Styrofoam, yard waste was something huge that we were seeing. And so we created this flyer. So this was just a simple flyer we made in Microsoft Word, and we started getting this out. We would also hand it out at any events that we would have as well. So then, as I said, we did the audits. These things were really great. People really there was a lot of comments, a lot of questions. I engaged with people on Facebook about this. So these were great things to share on social media. This right here, this orange tag, we call them an oops tag, or, essentially what it was is it was a violation sticker, I guess, originally, but then we renamed it to something a little more positive and called it our oops tag. And if we saw an issue, we would tag a barrel. So we recreated that from that orange one to something a little different. I couldn't find what it was exactly, but you're just trying to tell people, hey, looks good, but it looks like we saw this and this in there. So we kind of created a more friendly version of how you can help and how you can improve your recycling. And we tagged barrels. They were literally like a sticker that you peeled off and stuck on someone's barrel. This was really great. It was shared 18 times, which is great because it's getting pushed out into the community. And it was talking all about the contamination we were seeing. So anything you do like this, I think the community is really interested in hearing these kind of things, the good and the bad. You're going to have days when things don't look good, and that's okay to share that information. This was something really, my intern.
A 2-minute warning, Michelle, it's Dawn.
No, 2-minute warning, okay.
That's a give or take.
What?
Give or take.
Okay. Well, I'll get through as much as I can. That's okay. So this was a cool thing my interns did, where they took our trash and pulled out all the things that were contaminated, and to explain to residents. These were some other messages and things we put out. So again, we created flyers down the bottom corner after our audits that said these were the top things we're seeing that were contaminated, and we shared that with residents. These were extremely popular posts. This was on the left is the contaminated items, and on the right was clean deliveries, and we kind of showed everybody what the difference was, what things look like. This was shared 53 times, and there were 60 comments back and forth. So this was a very popular post that I did 2 different times with images. So in Gilford, our goal was to open the new facility. Again, we educated residents, we shared our data on our bailing, and we did the same type of thing with message boards. So these were the flyers I created for Gilford. And again, I took the ideas from those original Casella flyers that I showed you way back, and I created my own versions. And these we're still handing out now, a year later, anybody who's new to the facility, and we found a very simple way to explain what we will take in recycling and what we will take in trash. So these have been very useful. Again, sharing really positive stuff on Facebook when we were doing bailing. I thanked residents and told them how great everything was looking, told them what kind of money we were making. The one on the right, we had received $7,000 for our cans, and people were very excited about this. These posts are very popular. We share a lot of pictures. We talk about, we give people ways to sort their recycling. We share information about our crew and our bailing when we were giving tours. And again, all this stuff is very positive and people love to hear about it. We did a post on receiving the New Hampshire the Beautiful grant toward our bailer. These are some flyers I made up here for our seasonal free dump days and for recycling at Christmas time. So again, I've just made these over time and shared them. And I've started using Canva. These posts are from Canva. That's a new tool I've started using, and that's for my social media. I create really bright messages for different things. So these are just some examples of the messages that we sent out. but I really love that program. And I can't remember how much it costs for the year, maybe $120 for the year, but it's been fantastic. So it's very user friendly. And so lastly, you want to get that information out into the community. So again, we've talked about, you want to put your information on your town website. So if you don't have a Facebook page, that's okay. You can use your town website. And as I said, I just suggest you create a short link to, your website / recycle now, or something, and put your information there. You can work with the TV station if you have a local TV station. We have had them help us with creating videos. So that might be something where you use someone else's talents to help you send information out about recycling. Newsletters, like I said, I've utilized the town newsletters, the library's newsletters, and the school newsletters. So, all those newsletters that go out, feel free to create a flyer and ask them if you can attach it to their existing newsletter, because then it gets distributed to a larger audience. You could do an ad in a local paper. You could create some public presentations. I've been invited to like the Rotary Club and environmental clubs, and just other ways. If you're not on social media, that's okay. There's other ways to get your information out into the community. And lastly, community events. Anytime you have something, I don't know if anyone does National Night Out with PD or Touch a Truck event or Public Works events, but that's when you would print out your flyers and bring those to those events and hand them out and get your information out into the community. So again, just, try and make recycling fun. You can kind of do anything you want with it. We did an art contest, and again, another fun way to engage the younger generation and have them bring home these messages to their parents. So I hope I squeezed that in close to 10 minutes. So I just wanted to give you guys lots of ideas, kind of spark some interest, and obviously I'm available anytime. You can contact me. I'm happy to share any of my information with you that I've created over the years. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Michelle. That was fantastic. Great slides with so many photos. I can just add that canva.com also has a free version, and it's a blend of the Adobe suite, which could cost you generally like $1,000. So it's, even the free version has so many good tools. I would also just second that I use that as well. Awesome. And I see questions for you, but we're going to do questions at the end. Thank you, Michelle Theriault, Gilford, Public Works Director and Professional Engineer. We're going to turn it over next to Steve Bullek, who is the Public Works Director for the town of Lee, New Hampshire, and also an NRRA board member. And he will speak to us about transparent revenue and costs. Take it away, Steve.
Yeah, so my name's Steve Bullek. I'm the Public Works Director for the town of Lee. I'm new to the recycling world, so I learned a lot about when I took my position over. So we had issues in town. Recycling's supposed to be mandatory. We're probably at like 40% compliance with that, and we were just trying to figure out ways to put more information out there for people to see. So what I did was I took the monthly NRRA price sheet that they send all their members, and I took what the revenues would be for each commodity that we have, and I just posted them on each bin that we have. So like magazines cost money. So I made that in red compared to what we pay for the MSW and the stuff we were making money off of. I wrote the revenue we'd get from it, the market direction, whether it was going up or down, and that was done in green. So like glass costs us $40 a ton. But if you look at what we pay for MSW, it obviously makes more sense to take it out of your landfill trash and put it in the glass. Can you go to the next slide? So like there's the trash and then cardboard. Next slide. So we were just trying to be as transparent as possible, and we did this for every commodity we send to the landfill. We've noticed since we started doing that, our glass has increased dramatically. We've also started getting a lot more aluminum cans, tin cans, and milk jugs. So it has worked for the desired effect. And our revenues have gone up a little bit from it. And then the last slide, if you go to the next one, we have a committee in town called the We Sustainability Committee, and they came in and made these 1 bin at a time articles, and they're for every commodity that we do in every area of the transfer station that we have. So there's 21 slides that they've made. They go out in the We E-Crier, which is a weekly publication, but they've also decided that they want to make a book out of it. So they're going to make a 21-page book, and they're going to start handing it out to residents and have it available at the transfer station. And this will help because our town has seen a dramatic turnover in the residents in the last year, and we've got a lot of new people in town that have never been to the transfer station before. And with the whole COVID pandemic, we haven't been able to give the tours we normally do and explain to people how it works. So this is another way that it will help us reach the residents of the town. And that's all I have for you. That was quick and easy. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Much appreciated. And I just need to clarify that our first speaker was Meghan Theriault, not Michelle. Michelle's up next. Our next speakers will be talking together about the Betterbin app. So we'll have the app CEO and also a user sharing experiences about it. So I'm gonna welcome Michelle Gates, the CEO, and Marc Moran, who is the solid waste manager in Lebanon, New Hampshire.
Good morning, everybody. So Michelle and I are going to tag team this. I'll go first and just basically start the conversation. Michelle and I met, goodness, probably 8 months ago. When we were preparing this presentation, some of the ideas or thoughts that we were talking about as far as how did we arrive at utilizing Betterbin, which Michelle has developed. So why did Lebanon go this route? So Lebanon serves 90,000 people in the Upper Valley. We have 22 towns that utilize the landfill here in Lebanon. And as part of our effort to divert waste from the landfill, we've really taken a very different approach on outreach. We have a fairly aggressive website. It's lebanonnh.gov/solid waste, where we have a searchable database. So if you're looking to recycle a bicycle or a toaster oven, you can enter those words into our search engine, and it'll come up with how you manage that particular material. Whether it's recyclable, if there's a fee associated with it, or if it's a disposable item. As part of that, we were able to track how people were accessing the website. So what we discovered is about 75% of our website users actually access our website with the use of one of these little demons. And so we started looking at making sure that our website was user-friendly to mobile users, and then started looking at opportunities for developing an app. So we looked at a lot of places and landed on Betterbin. They made so much sense. It was simple to develop. And since we had a database that fed our website, it was an easy transition as far as getting information to Michelle and her team. So for us, it was just a natural progression towards an app development as part of our outreach program. And as Steve was just mentioning, you know, this idea of a transient population, I don't think we think about those parts of our communities enough. I know a lot of places in New Hampshire have seasonal population. There are some places that double in population during summer months. Here in the Upper Valley, we have huge turnover. And one of the other things that we tried addressing with this, because there's little text and a lot of images, is this notion of a bilingual or a multilingual community. And our second most popular or most spoken language in the Upper Valley is not Spanish. It's not Chinese, but it's an Asian language. I can't remember the name of it, but it's not what you would think it would be. So the use of imagery and limited text really helps get the message out there in a very different way. So for us, it just made sense. It's not the silver bullet. It's just one tool in the toolbox for us. We still do printed media, brochures. We do a lot with our website, and the app is just part of it. And we push a lot of people towards those applications, the digital applications, that is. And one of the things that we look at it is it's just another employee. So our staff push residents towards the app and the website just to save us time. A lot of folks ask questions like, how much does it cost to get rid of a refrigerator? Well, it seems like a pretty mundane thing, but when you're serving 90,000 people, those types of questions can consume your day. So this is just a great way to get the residents the information they need without consuming staff time. So there's an enormous benefit in my mind to utilizing these digital formats. With that, I'll pass it off to Michelle so she can explain what wonderful things the app does.
All right, thanks, Mark. And just gonna go to the next slide. And my screen, is it showing up a little strange for you there?
I'm not seeing it right now.
I'll change presenter. There you go. There you go.
Good.
So are you seeing my screen now?
I took the presenter, yeah. So
Okay,
I have,
so you just grab my screen. That works great. All right, can you go to the next slide, please? So thanks, Mark. Sorry for that transition there, but my name is Michelle. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Betterbin. You want to go back? There you go. Perfect. And yeah, so I'm going to first just tell you quickly how the app works and then give you a little background on why it came to be. So it's pretty simple. We just found that we wanted to be able to give consumers the ability to know exactly how to properly prepare any CPG product, whatever you're physically holding at your hand at home, how to prepare in your local recycling program. So we have a lot of knowledge that, every recycling program is different based on what your processing equipment looks like and then based on who your buyers are. And even that is cyclical and changes. And so we wanted to build a platform that was super easy for a consumer to just find out with the snap of a finger, is this product in my hand, in my kitchen, is acceptable in my local program. But then on the other end, give a tool to solid waste directors, MRF operators, that they didn't have to spend hours and hours updating, answering questions. And so we came up with the Betterbin app, and it allows you to scan the UPC barcode of any CPG product, or you can just text for that product. Like Mark said, if you were searching for a refrigerator or an oven or a toaster oven, and then we spit out to that user really specific instructions about how to properly prepare that item. If you need to flatten the box, if you need to take off a cap, if you need to keep a spray nozzle on or off, we literally get into the nitty-gritty details of exactly how you as solid waste directors and MRF operators want these materials coming into your facility. And then it works the same on the compost side, where a user could search for a specific product, whether it be, a banana, an apple, or it could be a brand specific, biodegradable, marketed as compostable food service package. So can you go to the next slide, please? So even though Mark and I have been in touch, like he said, for probably over a year, it took us some time to iterate on our technology, and we just implemented the app for Lebanon service area about a month ago. And just in the last month, we've got about 200, now it's just over 200 users who have searched and scanned for 566 products. And what's so cool about the app is we have a feed on our end that can constantly see what specific types of materials users have questions about. And hands down, over the past month, the most asked questions are about the thermoform plastic. So, the consumers always see that number 1 PET and think, oh, it's acceptable. Clearly, you as solid waste professionals know that that's not always the case. In Marc's program specifically, they don't want those coming in. So I've provided some photos of packages that consumers have emailed or sent to us via the app. The second most asked for type of material are those Tetra Paks and those cartons. So there's always that confusion about what the heck they're made of, the part plastic, part paper, or fiber. And whether or not they're acceptable. And so what's really great about this is that not only can consumers get answers directly from the app very quickly as to whether the product they're holding in their hand is acceptable, but we continue to communicate with Marc and his team to say, hey, these are the questions we're getting. And we continue to update the app with new content to match that consumer outreach. So this month we have a tips and tricks section in the app. And so we're going to update it with a lot of question and answers about these thermoform plastics, about the Tetra Paks. I think there's also some confusion about there's a lot of really tricky plastic containers, like hummus containers, that sometimes are 1, sometimes are 5s, and so there's a lot of questions around those. So we continue to update that information, and then on Marc's end, they can use that on social media, they can use it in their newsletters, and Meghan is absolutely right. Canva and social media paired together are just such an amazing resource, really low cost, and so in order to get the word out about the app, we're doing that same type of social media that Meghan is. On our end, we're actually doing some paid advertising, which honestly is great, even if you have a really small budget, $15 a week, $20 a week, because you really quickly learn the types of people, like demographics, and what people are looking at on your social media. And so pushing the app out via paid ads and just on normal social media, helps get people to the app, get people to Marc's website. And I should add that, so there's the tips and tricks section in the app, and there's also another section that's just a community news section. And we totally get that people like Meghan and Marc and all of you out there have already put together a ton of amazing materials, educational materials. And so we connect back directly from the app to your flyers, whether they're PDFs, whether on your website. Maybe you have a special drop-off event coming up. And so on our end, and what's involved in sort of the annual subscription of the app is it's our job to continually update that content, knowing that you have small teams and you wear a lot of hats, so you don't have time to be doing that. So yeah, overall, Betterbin really just got started because I was a frustrated consumer, really passionate about trying to sustainably manage my waste. And so we've tried to use design thinking and think of what consumers really have questions about and how quickly they want answers and what they want answers about. And that's sort of what built the app. And we've been really excited to, just get this started with Lebanon and continue to update them with analytics and updates to the app as we go forward throughout the year.
So I would like to just add a couple of things, what Michelle was talking about as far as this feedback loop between Betterbin and the city of Lebanon that's been kind of interesting is the feedback that we're getting from the users. We've heard back from a few users who were frustrated and insisted that the app was wrong. I've been recycling these products for years, and all of a sudden now the app comes out and it says that these are not recyclable. What people have learned through the app is that they've been recycling wrong for all these years. And unfortunately, we weren't able to reach them through other means. So it's been very interesting, and a lot of folks later have said, just how helpful it is. They're using it when they're shopping. So if they're looking at 2 different products, they're actually scanning both products before they purchase it to identify which one is recyclable and which one is not. So it's interesting to see how people are using this, not just at home, but when they're shopping. We also, although this app is specifically designed for Lebanon, the majority of the people served in the Upper Valley use curbside. And we met with Casella Waste, who is the primary service provider for recycling services in our region, just to make sure that, at the very least, our standard was higher than theirs. So curbside users in our region can also use the app to identify whether a product is or is not recyclable. I mean, there may be some items that they can pick up that we wouldn't take, but at the very least, it's still a tool that non-recycling center users can access and utilize to improve recycling. I know curbside, as was pointed out earlier, can be a problem with things like hoses and wire, which would still come up as a non-recyclable item in our list, and our curbside users can access that as well. So it's been a great project. It's been great working with Michelle and her team, and it's, I just see, huge benefits, and we've seen a lot of positive responses. Coming up next week, we're going to be setting up a booth at our local farmers market and helping more residents access the app, get it loaded. It's a bit different than what people think of with an app. It's a web-based app, so it'll work on anything. You can use it on your computer, a tablet, or a phone. So it's not something that you're going to go to like Google Play or the Apple Store and access it. So we've set up QR codes around the community for people to scan and download the app to their device. So it's a bit different. So we're going to be doing, there it is, right there, or over there. So yeah, people just scan the QR code. We've got it on our website. So it's been a great resource for us.
Do we still have time, or is our time up?
Hey, you guys are good. You have a couple minutes left, and I think we overall have a little buffer of time. So if you don't have more to talk about, we have questions for you, and I think we can just facilitate sort of some of these questions are dovetailing nicely between your presentation and Megan's.
Sure. Yeah, we can dive into questions if that's okay with you, Marc.
That works.
So one question for you is if you could just clarify what CPG means.
Oh, I'm sorry. So consumer packaged good. So anything you would find in your, kitchen, or your bathroom, or anything you would have at home that you purchase from like a grocery store, basically. Sorry about that. That was my fault.
Oh yeah, no problem. Recycling has so many acronyms, we all do it. So another question for Betterbin, can a non-Lebanon town try it out? So I guess that fits also with another question. Someone was asking about the pricing structure for the app. So maybe you could take those together.
Yeah, so first of all, oftentimes a community wants to sort of pilot it. And so we kind of set it up for either your team, or if you have a local sustainability group, or 10 to 15 people if they want to test it out and get their feedback. So we always do, sometimes we do pilots like that. In terms of pricing, so a couple of things. We are not a tech company that built a product for the material recovery industry. We were, frustrated consumers that built a product to serve the material recovery industry. Knowing that, we know that the budgets that you're working with, and so we always we have a scale for our subscription fee. That's what we pay, an annual subscription fee based on usually it's the households in your service area. So that's usually how we start that conversation out, is, how many users might be accessing the app. And then we just talk to you about what are your sort of educational and promotional support needs. So, you know, if you had someone like Meghan on your team, you wouldn't need a lot of help from us in terms of doing paid social media advertising, you know, designing posters and QR codes. But sometimes you need someone to give you that extra help, because a tool is only as good as people who know about it. So you have to talk about it. You have to do social media. You have to, you know, do presentations, and we absolutely can support that. It's totally based on the team. And so the pricing can just vary based on that. But I think that's also what's also important to know is we've built the app knowing sort of the complexities of MRF sheds, understanding that there can be MRF operators involved or a MRF involved, there can be haulers, there can be multiple haulers, there can be a community, there can be multiple jurisdictions. We totally understand that. And we try to brand it so that you feel good about, you know, that your users know it's you. So in Lebanon's app, we have the City of Lebanon's like logo, and then we do have the Betterbin logo. But in other communities, it's sort of maybe the municipal jurisdiction and a sponsor who is really interested in, you know, supporting the app in the community, or it's the municipal jurisdiction and the hauler or whoever the MRF operator is. So there's just a lot of flexibility knowing the complexities that you're dealing with in your jurisdiction.
Oh, Mark, you're muted.
So the other piece of that too, like Michelle mentioned, there's a level of service. Like for Lebanon, we recently started a food scrap collection program. So there's like this tiered approach where you can do a food scrap identification and then consumer goods identification. So there's like this tiered approach to it. So Lebanon opted for kind of the full list. So with the new food scrap program, it was helpful for folks to see, you know, just what is available for food scrap recycling or diversion, because what we accept for food scraps is very different than what people are accustomed to as far as backyard composting might be in, you know, in their experience. So it's been very helpful to get some of that information out. I will just say that it's extremely economical. And as Michelle pointed out, it's another employee, and being able to divert some of these questions to a digital resource can be extremely helpful. Some of those very simple questions, you know, like I said, they just add up, and nobody's getting more people. And to be able to have a resource where your residents can access something digitally can be very helpful. All that said, though, there is a fraction of the population, and being a rural state, you know, Michelle's from a rural state as well, so they understand that there are people who are relatively put off. I mean, I am not a techie at all. You know, I think there's a lot of disconnect when we go to these digital formats. You know, we remove some of the humanity, but the thing that's interesting, as Michelle pointed out with the questions, it's not just, you know, hey, how do I recycle, you know, this device or whatever. There's a person behind that, you know. And we recently got a question about tennis ball containers. So somebody sent Michelle a question about, can I recycle this tennis ball container? Because it had an aluminum rim on the top, but it was a #1 plastic. So Michelle sent that request to me. I actually sent that to Bonnie. So there was some humanity involved in this digital platform that you might not see otherwise. So to me, it's kind of refreshing to see that there's people involved. It's not just these quick answers. So I've found it really great to work with Betterbin, and we're seeing some really positive responses from our public. So we're pleased.
Yeah, just one quick addition to what Mark said is, yeah, we don't rely completely on the app. We have a team on our end who are, you know, has human eyes on what's going on. And a perfect example is we just had a user scan the barcode of a container of ammonia, and, you know, we could tell them this is HDPE, this is acceptable, and then because we use the app and email together, users log in with an email. We have a way to communicate back and forth with users. She emailed back and said, no, I wasn't wondering what to do with the outside of the container. I was wondering what to do with the ammonia, which, you know, how often is a person going to be able to get that immediate feedback and knowing what we know about what Marc accepts at his entire facility above and beyond just the recycling center, we were able to just email her a quick answer. So it is like being an extension, an extra employee, like Marc kind of said. You just don't have to pay us as much.
Great. Yeah, lots of questions for you. Michelle, do you mind if I give you a few at the same time? Okay, great. So, people just are wondering about an upfront cost and an annual cost. Is it one cost? And then a few questions are sort of related about sort of analytics. So one question is, can those analytics be used with producers, maybe just sort of address items that aren't recyclable? And then kind of a related question is, can you use, or do you want to use the app to shift consumers' behavior for like preference of one product over another, such as like glass or PET? And then does the app identify recycled content items? So I guess just, does it go deeper? What are the capabilities beyond just like, how do you recycle something? And then Marc, your curbside. Marc, you're drop off only, right?
Yes, we are drop off only. But as I mentioned, because of our large service area, we work very closely with curbside recycling providers.
Thank you. Michelle?
Okay, yeah, so just cut me off whenever you need to. So I will start with the first one. I wrote some notes. So again, on the cost, it's done as an annual subscription. So a one-time fee, there's no add-ons, nothing, no. And the expectation is we are newer, and so we want to give you the absolute best of customer service. I mean, for Marc and his team, we designed all the QR codes. We're going to make sure that they have materials for their farmers market. We help with all that design stuff. So we're here to support you. I mean, that's what we're passionate about. That's what I'm passionate about. So one annual subscription, again, usually number of households served is where we start with a baseline. Marc, do you mind if I share how much the subscription for you guys costs? Is that?
No, I think that's reasonable.
So it was $3,500, $3,500 for the entire year for everything. Access to both the composting side of the app, recycling side of the app. And as you heard, he has a population of 90,000. Maybe it's like 15,000 households-ish. Is that somewhere around there?
Yeah.
And use of analytics to change consumer and brand behavior. So whoever said that totally nailed it. So because we haven't completely researched every MRF shed in the United States, we can't make this a national app, knowing that guidelines vary based on communities. But one thing we have narrowed in on where we can really quickly help, hopefully, solid waste directors and MRFs out nationally is on the flexible plastics, the LDPEs that you generally don't want coming into your facilities, but that there are, 18-ish thousand drop-off facilities across the US. And so we absolutely see that users have questions about these flexible plastics, both sort of that non-stretchable, crunchy plastic wrap, as well as the LDPE that is acceptable in those drop-offs. And so our idea really is to provide users with a rewards program for doing the right things, starting out with those materials. So, having a point system in the app where they're able to snap a photo of their product with their LDPE. They check in at any of these locations across, the grocery stores where they can drop off LDPE and are rewarded points, and then are provided with gift cards sponsored by brands. So like a $2.50 Amazon gift card, that type of thing. And so we absolutely, as we have a larger user base, we probably only have about 3,000 users using our app right now, like communities like Lebanon. And we want to, at a scale, be able to show brands, hey, these are the products that your consumers have questions about. They care enough to ask the question. You should care enough as a brand to think about the design of your packaging and think about what's actually acceptable in municipalities across the US and beyond. And every month with analytics, we're going to report back to Marc with, how many users, how many new users, how often are they coming back, what products are they searching or scanning for, both on the recycling and composting side. So yes, lots of information that at the end of the day, it's kind of what makes us a tech startup, and is, you know, really how we're attracting investors in terms of our analytics and the data that we can show back to brands. Preference of one type of packaging over another. This is incredibly tricky, and I've done a significant amount of research. I've connected with a guy, amazing, David Alloway from the Department of Environmental Quality in Oregon. Has done a ton of life cycle analysis on, think about the 5 different types of coffee packaging you could have, from a glass container to that mixed material bag to a HDPE container to a sort of that cardboard tin and plastic. And, you know, they've done the life cycle analysis to show that if you're only thinking about the end of life of that material, the differences in your carbon footprint are minimal. The most important decisions made come in the design of that packaging before it even gets out there, the product, the transportation. You know, if you look at a pie chart, only about 2% of the product's carbon footprint has to do with its packaging, and what a consumer does is its end of life. So at before I had dug into that research, we absolutely wanted consumers to be thinking about, you know, what's better? Is it better if I buy this flexible packaging wrap, or is it better if I buy, you know, a box with bars in it? And I really do, I think it would be greenwashing to give consumers that type of information without a life cycle analysis of that item. However, what I do think is critical is that a consumer knows what's acceptable in their local program. And if they are going to participate, you know, that's the best way they can reduce the carbon footprint of that product at its end of life. So we do want people to be able to go to the grocery store and make a choice on a particular packaging based on where they live. So I hope that answers that question. Recycled content. So our computer vision sort of machine learning cannot currently detect, like, if it's 20% recycled content in it, but it is absolutely a place where, and I'm sorry, I only have these packages on my desk, but so if someone scanned this package, what we can really easily do is help that brand tell the consumer a story. They're going to say, hey, you know why we chose this packaging, and maybe talk about the LCA, and maybe they do have 20% recycled content in there. And if the consumer cares enough to take that story with them to the store the next time, then that is a way we can do that. So yeah, and then use for drop off and curbside. So definitely works for both. Again, we are very, very aware of the complexities of MRF sheds, and you could have multiple haulers in one municipality. You could have apartment buildings next to each other with different haulers taking their materials to different MRFs. And so we've developed the back end of the app in a way that can really, really easily give very specific instructions that vary in a tight geographical area. And kind of an example, sort of an example of that is when Marc mentioned to me that users questioned, you know, is this information actually right? So we're going to spend next week going back through the instructions that we're providing to people and update it and say, hey, this is exactly how we got these. You know, we prepared these instructions. We talked directly to the solid waste manager at the Lebanon recycling facility. It's so easy for us to add that level of detail to the instructions that users are getting back. So I don't want to hog all the time though, so I'm going to stop talking.
That's okay. I also have a question for you, Michelle. I guess this is sort of the last question. Someone wants to know what exactly is a Tetra Pak, and why does it read that it's recyclable, but it's not recyclable?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't have one next to me, but if you've ever gone to a grocery store and seen sort of those shelf-stable soup or broth rectangles, sometimes you see protein drinks in them. It's a mix of paper and plastic. It's called the Tetra Pak, sort of similar to like a carton orange juice or dairy, but not exactly the same. And usually the how to recycle label, at least the brands that they work with, it says check locally, because it totally depends on where you live if you want them. So if they're acceptable.
So it's one of the things that we've found with the use of this app is it really addresses those confusions. What consumers are finding is it's there are more and more products out there that have these, recycling guidelines on them. And as Michelle pointed out, for a number of them, including Tetra Pak and some of these other funkier ones like Amazon packaging, it'll say in very small letters underneath a larger recycling symbol, check local options. But people aren't reading that far into these packages and just see the recycling symbol and just, well, this is recyclable and you're a recycling center. A plus B equals you're going to recycle this. And that's not always the case. Very often that's not the case with some of these more exotic recyclable products. So it's the app has allowed us to really inform the public about what is and what is not recyclable. And as those markets change, it's real easy for us to work with Michelle and change some of those criteria. I mean, we work really hard to create kind of a fairly broad recycling specification for the residents to reduce confusion, but plastics, I don't know, for me, plastics are very frustrating. I'm sure for a lot of other folks out there, because it gets all the press is about plastics recycling, and people are still recycling paper and cardboard badly, but we're so focused on plastics that it ends up taking away from some other good local recycling options when people are so hyper focused on, why can't I recycle this spinach container? And it's like, it's such a small thing. Are you diverting your food scraps? Are you, doing some of these other things? But plastics just get so much press. You're seeing so much about plastic in the media that it just becomes such a hyper focus for consumers, and which in my mind is unfortunate. But this app is helping eliminate a lot of that confusion.
Yeah, I should add another item we see so frequently are yogurt containers. No one knows what to do with those yogurt containers, and as you probably all know, most of them are the polypropylene, but some of your programs do and don't accept it right now. So
Thank you. Lots of questions. I think we can work backwards to some questions for Megan and Steve, but Steve will go next. Steve, are you there? Want to make sure he's unmuted.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, good, thank you. So we got a compliment on your signage and how it's simple and clear. So how long does it take you to manage and design that? And then can you talk more about your resident booklet? Maybe are you going to have it printed, or what is sort of the end goal or the hopeful end goal with that?
So it didn't take very long. It just to make this signage. Depends on which signage you're referring to. If you're referring to the green ones that are hand painted, those took a while. The guys in the transfer station hand painted all that and then hand painted the letters. The other ones that I made that tell the prices take 5-10 minutes, and then you just laminate them. And then that booklet is not even really released yet. They were talking about doing it, and they sent it to me to use for this presentation like 2 days ago. So our hope, I think, is they'll have it printed out and they'll start handing it out at the transfer station. We'll probably put a link to it because it's all in PDF format too, and have a link to it off the transfer station's website.
Great, thank you. So I guess, Steve, who is they? I think we're sort of having a couple questions about sort of maybe at your level, you're the director,
There's a sustainability committee in town that made it. So there's a group of 7 or 8 individuals that are part of the Lee Sustainability Committee that came up with all of that. They deal a lot with the education aspect of it and what goes on in the transfer station. We do some of it, but they do a lot more than we do in the worker level.
Great. Thank you, Steve. I'm gonna, head back to the start and go back to Megan and maybe let her close it out. Are you there?
I am.
Hi, Megan, Theriault. Okay, so someone was wondering about your waste audits and how they're conducted and sort of like who is doing them. And then I think just sort of, you know, you're the director of DPW, and it's clear you've put in a ton of time. So do you sort of have, you know, staff, or like Steve said, he has a sustainability committee, sort of who's helping you implement and design all of these things?
Okay, so in Goffstown, I did have staff to help. I had college interns in the summer, so they were very helpful in coming up with ideas. And when I started in Goffstown, I was a town engineer for 15 years. So as the town engineer, I created a lot of these things, and I had an engineering tech with me who did help. I also had a administrative assistant who really was passionate about recycling too, so she tried to help me. And then the interns definitely were very helpful. And then when I became the director, my newly hired town engineer helped me. So I did have staff in Goffstown to help with those things. Here in Gilford, most of that, because I had so many resources already created in Goffstown, I've kind of been doing most of that. You know, obviously everybody helps me with getting the information out in the community, but I'm the one who manages the Facebook page here, and who created the, you know, the flyers and stuff. But a lot of that is because I had done it in Goffstown, so I had a lot of ideas already in my head, like all those A-frame posters. We created those over the years in Goffstown, and I made some new ones here, but those are pretty easy and simple to make. So I don't really have extra staff to help out here, but luckily I've got a background of info that is making it a little easier. So regarding the audits, if I can share my screen, I'll show you pictures. I don't know if someone can share that. Let me know when you see it. Let's see. Show my screen. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So we did two kinds of audits. So the first audit I said that we did was a barrel audit. So this is one of my interns, and her and I went out together and literally just flipped bins. And we didn't poke around, you know, we just looked in from the top. And if we saw any violations or if everything was great, you know, we had little check boxes that says everything looks fantastic, thank you for recycling right. Or things look good, but, you know, if you could remember that these things are not recyclable. So we tried to make it a friendly little flyer, and like I said, we just flipped open the bins, and we did tell people ahead of time that we were going to be doing this. So I think, trying to see where that is. I created, maybe I didn't have it on here. Oh, right here. Do you see this page? So this was a flyer I made that was a public notice, and it said when we're doing it, where it's going to be. So I had that information, and we sent this out, common violations to avoid. So we did send out a flyer to let people know we were going to be doing it. And then we did do it, I think in the maybe summer and fall or something. So we did those ones, and those were very, very popular. And we had a lot of questions when we were out in the field too. And the other audit we did was with NRRA. It was actually Mike Dufour right there came with us, and we had a fresh load, you know, of recycling dumped out from we have our curbside packers. And so that came and dumped a load, and Mike and I measured out, we kind of filled, like, I don't know, let's say we filled three bags or 4 bags with miscellaneous stuff. So we weren't picky, we just kind of threw stuff in, didn't look at what it was, and we weighed those trash bags, and then we separated everything out. So let's say we weighed 4 trash bags total, and then we broke open the trash bags and pulled them apart, and we pulled apart, you know, what was contaminated, what was clean, and then we were specific about, you know, okay, in the contaminated items, what percentages do we think this is? So we just did it like that. We just kind of real simple, just had some scales and weighed things out. But I do think it was very helpful to show people all these pictures and to really point out, you know, when you look at things, you know, you can see right here, you can see a lot of plastic bags and stuff like that. So I think it was really helpful to show people what we were seeing instead of just a flyer that, you know, talks about it and lists the items that are contaminated. I think pictures tell a lot more. So I always try and post things with pictures. I just feel like they're more engaging for people to see an image associated with what you're telling people. So like I said, those images, when we showed them the contaminated type items, you know, this is the stuff we were seeing in recycling, you know, and people couldn't believe it. They were just like, oh my gosh, you know, we can't believe that stuff is in there. It's like, well, it is, and we need your help, you know. So these are some of the things that would happen. And there were certain days, definitely, like we knew what areas of town we were getting a higher contamination. It was the more populated areas, the more little downtown areas, you'd call it, like Pinardville, definitely had a higher contamination. And so we tried to focus our audits there, but we did do them in other areas as well. So, so I think that answers that. What other question did you have, or?
That's about it. We are winding down. We have about a minute and a few seconds left. I'm a stickler for time, but I have, if you have nothing else, Megan, I have 2 things I can close with.
Sure.
Okay, great. We just had a message kind of going back sort of to the Tetra Pak question, I think. The United States Carton Council has a new market in this region for refrigerated and shelf-stable cartons out of Waterbury, Connecticut, and possibly NRRA members will be hearing more about that in the future. And then, Megan, just to add on to your presentation, I previously worked at the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection when they launched the Recycle Right campaign, and their website contains printable graphics that are editable for communities. So it might say Recycle Right in X town or city, and they have banners, they have A-frames, they have those oops tags on their website. I'm sorry I don't have their website in front of me, but I'm sure, you know, I'd be happy if anybody wanted to email me or email MassDEP directly. They have a really good website. You can just go to massdep.com or .gov. And I think that's it. Thank you for listening, and I can turn it back over to Reagan.
Actually, thank you. This is Heather Herring. I am Member Services Representative at NRRA. I wanted to thank you all, Dawn, Megan, Steve, Michelle, and Mark, for those great presentations and great questions. At this point, we'll be taking a 15-minute break, so feel free to stretch and get a snack. We will return at 9:35 a.m. for our next session, Waste Reduction Strategies, Reduce, Reuse, Rot. Thank you so much. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good break. Now it's time for our next session, Waste Reduction Strategies, Reduce, Reuse, and Rot. Paul Tomasi, Executive Director of the Northeast Kingdom Waste Management District, will moderate our next session. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Heather. So we'll jump right in, and the first speaker will be Dennis Patno, former transfer station supervisor for the town of Lancaster, New Hampshire. Dennis?
Okay. Good morning. I'm going to talk about pay-as-you-throw when we initiated it in our town. You can go to the next slide. Or next slide. It's a little bit about me. I started for the town in 1997. Before I started for the town, I was a building and electrical contractor. And without even realizing it, I learned a lot about our facility. As a contractor, I used to bring in materials, demolition waste to get rid of, and the guy running the facility would say, hey, you got 4 or 5 receptacles? I'd say, yeah, I got them in my truck. I'd give him those. He'd let me throw the demo out for free. So, you kind of learned what was going on down there. And then in April of 97, the position to run the place came up, and I decided that would be the right move for me, not knowing really anything about recyclables and recycling. So I went to work for the town, and it didn't take long at all, only a few weeks to learn what was going wrong down there. I started to really get into it, both feet. I really enjoyed it, and I still enjoy it today. Over the beginning, I met Tony Lacqua from Littleton. He ran the Littleton Recycling Center, and they were doing pay-as-you-throw down there at that time. And talking a lot with Tony and going to the NRRA meetings, I decided that I'd like to see what we could do in Lancaster. So I met with the select board about the pay-as-you-throw, and they were all for it, the town manager and the selectmen. So I put together quite a lot of information on it, on how I was going to do it, and just a few of the other things I did to transfer station. As you can see, once we did the pay-as-you-throw, there was a lot of things we had to add because the recycling went way up, and we needed more equipment to do that. If you want to go to the next slide. Along with pay-as-you-throw, I found out that one of the most important things you have to do is educate the public. I took almost a year and a half educating the public, talking about, we had open meetings, always took questions at the transfer station, selectmen's meetings, explaining to the people what it was, and that we would have our own separate budget for pay-as-you-throw. And as you can see, these are some of the items that pay-as-you-throw, the selling of the bags, covers for the cost. If you want to go to the next slide, that is just a, next slide. This is actually a copy of the pay-as-you-throw budget to show, back one. That is actually a copy of our pay-as-you-throw budget for this calendar year. It's not my budget anymore, I'm retired, but it shows you, as far as the MSW, everything that is covered by the bag, by the selling of the bag. There's a couple things they added this year, which we didn't have in there before. Things like the insurance for the full-time employees, the workman's comp, Medicare and that stuff. So our bottom lines are going to be different this year. I don't think this year it will cover our expenses because of them putting those items into the budget. Next page. So in 1998, I started educating the public, which is the most important thing. I spent a lot of time. I had a lot of questions. I had people say to me, well, Dennis, I recycle now, and so I'm going to get penalized by having to buy these bags because I'm a good recycler. I said, no, it's just the opposite. I said, when you buy your bags and you recycle good and at curbside, because we have curbside and drop off, you put out one bag of trash and 5 containers of recyclables, and your neighbor puts out no recyclables and 5 bags of garbage. With it coming off the tax roll, you're actually paying for them not to recycle. And the people that I explained that to understood it, and were very much for it. A couple other things we did is at that time in 1998, I took our town's tax rate and figured it out that if you had a home that the tax value was $66,000, if you bought 1 town bag a week, it was a break even. So if your property was worth less than that, well, it might not be worth it if you're using 1 bag a week. But as we all know, most properties are worth more than $66,000. That was one of the big things that I talked about. I had elderly people ask questions, like, what about us? We only have a small amount of garbage. That's why I initiated 3 size bags, 33, 20, and 13 gallon. And after all the education was done, it went to town meeting in March of '99. It passed almost unanimously. There was only 12 no votes. I felt pretty good about that. And we activated the plan, and July 1st was our start date. At that time, we had everything set up. We had bought the bags. I actually made sure I was there every day so I could deal with the questions, problems from the public in case there was any issues that aroused. And after about 2 weeks, I had a number of people come to me and say, Dennis, why didn't you do this years ago? They loved it. I had one gentleman tell me, he says, I'm glad you voted for the bags because I hate recycling. And now I can just put all my stuff in town bags and not worry about recycling. I said, well, fair enough. Where you've bought the bag, you can do that. Well, I kept an eye on him, and over the months, about 6 months later, I noticed he had 1 bag of garbage and a number of containers of recyclables. With hitting him in the wallet, it took about 6 months to train him, but most people do a great job. There are a few people in our town that still don't believe in the pay-as-you-throw bags. And like I was saying, we have curbside and drop-off. Our curbside is done with a private contractor who we contract for 3-year contracts. And it's the understanding that if they have their garbage out at the street, not in a town bag, it is not to be picked up. The recyclables need to be sorted in a manageable fashion, so it doesn't make them a lot of work. We have very little problems with as far as the curbside. As far as the drop off, there are some people that still don't want to use the bags, so they bring their garbage and stuff in regular bags, and we charge them a premium to drop it off more than it costs for the bags. So, they want to spend extra money instead of buying the bags. That's totally up to them. If you want to go to the next slide.
And Dennis, I just want to remind you, you have about 1.5 minutes left.
Oh, come on. I love to talk. Okay, thank you. So the very important part of it is education. You need to educate the public on how it works. You've got to have your town officials behind you. You need to have your selectman behind you, your town manager, or whatever your form of government is for the town, and how it works. If you can answer all those questions, most people are going to be interested in it. The budget, we created a separate budget for accountability for the public and us. And then after it was initiated, we worked with the public, answer any questions, help them with unforeseen problems, unexpected issues. We did get a bunch of bad bags. We replaced them with the public at no charge to them, obviously. Our MSW tonnage in 1998 was 1,500 tons. In the first full year we did it, which was 2000. Oh, next slide, I'm sorry. Like I said, the year before we did it was 1,500 tons. The first full year after pay-as-you-throw, we dropped down to 500 tons of MSW a year. We got rid of all packer trucks that were coming in. They're not allowed to dump at our facility. We got rid of a number of commercial businesses. Most commercial businesses had no problem at all with the pay-as-you-throw. They understood. And I always explain to them, if a commercial business creates trash, that means they're making money. Where a resident, it's just an expense for them. So I've had no problem with commercials. Recycling rates roughly doubled. And I couldn't do any of what I did at the transfer station without a good crew. That's the other thing you need. And that's pretty much it.
That's great. Just about perfect on the timing. So, and we'll hold questions. I see a couple coming in, but we'll hold those until the other speakers have a chance to speak. Next up is Marc Morgan, Solid Waste Manager from the City of Lebanon. Marc, take it away.
Thank you. All right, I'm just, can you see my screen, Paul?
Yes, we can see your GoToWebinar screen.
Okay. All right, so you can see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So as part of the this waste reduction discussion, Dennis talked about increasing recycling. About 4 years ago, Lebanon took a different look at waste diversion. It really started as a discussion over coffee at a local coffee shop. We were preparing for Earth Day and just thinking about what are we going to do for Earth Day events. And we had started by talking about, you know, these concepts, which are great ideas about recycling right and things of that nature. And so I had proposed, you know, working a little further up the solid waste hierarchy, which talks about reducing our waste first. So from that came this concept or campaign rather we've called Refill, Not Landfill. The picture you see here in front of you is the Lebanon landfill. This is our trash compactor. We receive about 200 tons a day of MSW. So the idea was to get people to start thinking about where their trash is going and that it's consuming space. We do serve a number of communities in the Upper Valley, which stretches from New Hampshire into Vermont. Population served is about 90,000. We did partner with the local food co-op store, and the food co-op store serves 42,000 members within our service area. So it was a great partnership. It allowed us to leverage some of their marketing strategies and resources. The local food co-op store has got an amazing marketing department, so we're able to work with them and promote a lot of our programs through their membership avenues. So what does a reuse program look like in a community? We created this Refill Not Landfill decal. As part of the campaign, we talked about how do you promote it without generating waste. So we figured everybody's got their own, you know, preferred coffee mug or travel mug. So we just created a decal that people could put the sticker on themselves or put it wherever they wanted as a way to promote the program. The idea also comes from, there's a philosophy in outreach called community-based social marketing. And the idea is to put your outreach as close to what is called the moment of decision as possible. So the idea of putting a decal on your cup causes the person who's using the cup to think about, why am I using a reusable travel mug? It also helps generate conversations. You know, people ask, what is that supposed to mean? Refill, not landfill. So it allowed that outreach to become organic and more grassroots. It also helps create small positive steps. When we talked about starting a program, the Refill Not Landfill program, it started with a conversation about eliminating plastics, which wasn't a bad idea, but our concern was it was extremely difficult to eliminate plastic from a person's life. And our fear was people would feel like they failed. So the idea of doing something positive, like reusing a travel mug or a water bottle or a reusable bag, seemed like a very positive thing to do, and allowed people to succeed and then also create a habit. So City of Lebanon made the entire month of April Refill Not Landfill month. We created a proclamation and encouraged people for the month to change a habit. And then if you can change your habits, then it becomes you know, something that you do on a regular basis. So we asked people to take a pledge. We created a web page on our website focused on Refill Not Landfill. It included refill-friendly local merchants. You know, where can you get your coffee refilled? Where are some public water filling stations? What local merchants allow reusable bags, things of that nature. So we asked people to pledge and just pledge to do something for that month. And we had a series of, I think, 4 items that we asked people to pledge. And then during the month, to continue the engagement with them, we created a prize package with the food co-op. So the food co-op donated reusable container gift bags and lunch container gift bags that, you know, we randomly selected some of the participants during the month, and, you know, every week just awarded one of these prize packages to the participants. Then asked the participants to take a photo, a selfie of them with their new reusable containers, and then we pushed it on social media. To keep the conversation going, we decided to do what we called community conversations. So after April, we started doing these community-wide conversations in hopes to just keep things rolling so that it wasn't just a one-time event. There were some other things that came out of those conversations. I was shocked to see the number of people participate. When we started these, we were getting, we did quarterly meetings at local restaurants, and we were getting 15 to 20 local people, just residents or store owners, participating and talking about how do we increase reuse opportunities in the community. And one of the situations that arose for us was, you know, just talking about some barriers to reuse. We were surprised to learn some of the barriers were not what we expected. Some people, you know, just talked about a lot of social norms, you know, that they felt uncomfortable doing reuse, or just other things that we weren't expecting in these conversations. We also started developing some repair cafes. We're going to do some bike repair cafes and then other just kind of pop-up repair cafes. These have been fairly popular in central Vermont, Solid Waste Management District. So that's what these were based on initially, was just looking at what some of our neighbors were doing. We did host, I think, 3 green shopping initiatives with the co-op. As part of the conversation, it was, you know, through these community conversations, it became pretty clear to us that folks don't really know how to shop environmentally. It sounds like a crazy notion, but there are some very simple things that people don't realize that are available for environmental options. They didn't understand the bulk food sections in their local co-ops or grocery stores. They didn't understand what was acceptable, how they had to participate in those programs. So we provided a number of green shopping initiatives, workshops, and we had 40 people participate in those in the Upper Valley. And we developed this Recup program in the Upper Valley as a result of the community conversations. This is a cup swap program, and we actually use something called a Husky cup. So we have 3 local coffee shops in the Upper Valley that utilize this cup, and you go to your store, bring your cup in, you leave this cup, and they give you a clean, sanitized cup filled with coffee, and then they clean your cup and share it.
Mark, I just want to let you know you have about a minute left.
All right, thanks, Paul. So as a part of some of these initiatives, the co-op moved towards phasing out and has since eliminated plastic grocery bags from their stores. And we saw one local coffee shop move from charging less for refills to charging for disposables, and saw a huge increase in participation in reusable coffee cups when they moved to charging more for the disposable. So what's next? We're looking at expanding the Recup program, but we're also looking at the impacts of COVID on reuse options. There's some obvious ones that people have freaked out about. Reusing coffee cups is still a little bit of a touchy area. Reusable bags are now allowed in New Hampshire. They weren't for a while. So there's still a lot of people kind of freaked out about it. And then planning for 2022 at this point. As far as getting started, partnering with another organization really helps get the ball rolling. For us, partnering with the co-op food store made the most sense just because the values matched what we were hoping to accomplish. Also, measuring your success. We had 280 pledge participants. We had 224 engagements on social media. And then we held 60 community we had 60 community conversation participants over the year.
Mark, I'm going to have to have you wrap up.
This is my last slide, Paul.
Okay, all right.
So the Refill Not Landfill campaign, if anybody wants to do it, I'd be happy to help you folks develop it in your community. It's not a trademark thing, it's just a concept. Helps move the needle forward and allows your residents to divert waste outside of areas that are typical. It's not a recycling program, it's eliminating waste. So happy to talk to anybody about it, and look forward to hearing more from you folks.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Our next speaker is Joan Cudworth, Director of Public Works from the town of Hollis, New Hampshire, and she'll be talking about food scrap composting. Take it away, Joan.
Thank you very much, Paul. In June of 2019, the town of Hollis decided that we needed to change it up a bit and do some different things. And how were we going to do that? So the first thing we wanted to do was figure out how we could reduce the amount of trash that we were disposing of. So what I did was I went to a Board of Selectmen's meeting and I brought a bowl of vegetable scraps from my home for a week. And the Board of Selectmen were amazed at how much that bowl weighed for just my husband and myself for vegetable scraps. So the conversation got started, and with that, they gave permission for me to try to start a campaign, of course, along with the Department of Environmental Services, to see if this was something we could do or not. So that's how we kind of got started. Do we have my first slide? Yes. So what we did was, and this was kind of interesting, is we kind of brainstormed, how could I get the word out that we wanted to try to start vegetable scrap composting? And a gentleman, a resident, had come in and he had this Pac-Man that he was disposing of. And I thought, ooh, this might be kind of interesting. So what we did was an employee and myself, we got together, we got a rolling cart out of the scrap metal pile. We put Pac-Man on top of it and secured it down. And my staff member made it into a girl, if you will, a Pacalina, and she's got a big bow on top of her hair. And we have vegetable scraps hanging from the cart. And what we did was we moved it around the transfer station for weeks and weeks. And it was an odd enough thing that people stopped and said, Joan, what are you doing here? What is this for? And so the conversation got started. And we continued this for many, many weeks. And then what we did was we sent 2 employees to the main composting school soon after this conversation got started. And those 2 employees were there for a week. They learned the do's and don'ts of composting. And so what we did was we came back and we started our new message. Next slide, please. So what we did was we put this composter out that was donated to the transfer station with this sign. And what we did was we moved the Pacalina around the yard and we had barrels out and we continued to talk to residents about vegetable scrap recycling. We also talked a lot about home composting and how they could do it at home as well. And so what we learned from this was people were starting to listen to us. And we picked a small group of people who were very much interested. And so what they would do is they'd bring their vegetable scraps to the transfer station. They would put them in these gray trash cans that we had. And then what we would do is we would transport them down to our stump dump. And that's a facility that takes grass and brush and so forth. And so what we did was every week we would weigh how much the trash cans weighed. We started out about 20 pounds or so, and as it increased, we were more at 50. And now we're over 100 pounds a week of vegetable scraps. And so what we do is we bring them down to the stump dump. Next slide, please. And we have some concrete blocks. And what we do is we dump everything into the concrete block area. And that's where we start the composting. So you can see in there, there's some green bags. Those are the bags that one of the supermarkets sells, and they're supposed to be biodegradable bags. Kind of keep those off to the side. We're working 2 different piles because I'm really not sure how long it will take for those bags to biodegrade. But as you can see, we've got quite a bit right there. That's a little less than a year's worth in that bin right there. And so that's how it gets started. We have a loader on the property as well down there, so we're able to move the material. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we've got 2 piles going right now that have compost in them, have vegetable scraps in them. We have different recipes going in both those piles, and we're monitoring them. We're constantly monitoring them, and we're going to make some new piles. And it's kind of set off to the side that our residents don't really see it at the moment because it is a work in progress, and it's going to take some time to master, you know, composting and practicing different recipes to get where we want to be. So this summer, we're going to take some of our compost that we've made, and we've got flower gardens down at the stump dump, and we're going to try different compost in different flower beds and see how the flowers react and do. And so we're just going to continue to monitor it. We're going to continue to educate people about vegetable recycling and so forth. And so what the next plan is because MSW is going up, the price is definitely going up. We are now going to do 2 campaigns. One this Saturday at town meeting. We're having an information table, and I'm going to have a big bowl with vegetable scraps in it, and I'm going to pass it around with hopes that people will feel how much weight is in that bowl. And then from there, we're going to be creating a salad bowl, if you will, when residents exit the transfer station. And in this salad bowl, we're going to have all different kinds of vegetable scraps with an awareness piece. And telling residents, you know, this is what it costs for this kind of weight in the trash versus composting it. So we're going to work that avenue as well and try to get the word out. The biggest thing that we find is education. The more you educate, the better off you're going to be. And we've got to do something to save tax dollars. And so this is what the town of Hollis is working on. That's all I really have.
Okay, well, thank you, Joan. We will then launch into some questions. We have had several people submit questions, and we'll start with a couple of questions for Dennis. So Dennis, the first question we have is, could you explain how punch cards and sticker pay-as-you-throw systems work, and whether the bag system is preferable?
We've never looked into really the punch card or the other way. Basically, the reason we started with the bags is because talking with Tony down to Littleton, because they were already doing it, and he said the bags were working good on his town down there. Talking with the select board and stuff, if you start doing like a punch tag, or a punch tag won't work for curbside pickup because the contractor is not going to punch a ticket, or they could take a 50-gallon lawn bag and fill it up and put a tag on it if you use a bag and tag. So that's why we went with the bags, because they're all regulated as far as the size, and we could keep better track of it.
Okay, here's another question for you, Dennis. How do you estimate pay-as-you-throw revenues for your budget, since the revenue estimate is quite variable and hard to estimate?
Actually, our MSW budget is fairly straightforward every year. Like I said, this year now it's going to be different because the select board has decided to add those items into our cost analysis. So then you have total cost analysis instead of leaving something out like health insurance or workman's comp or short-term disability payments. This way it's more realistic. And there is a chance that the new transfer station supervisor after this year will probably need to go up on bag prices. Our bag prices have stayed the same for the last 21 years. And I had made a promise to the public that I would keep the bag prices the same for 7 years. Well, we've been 21 years. We haven't had to raise the prices, but now we may need to raise them some so it gets back to a self-supporting.
Okay, and we'll stick with Dennis. I think we have 2 more questions, and then we'll go to Mark for a couple questions. Dennis, did you provide, or did the town provide any programs for low-income persons for your pay-as-you-throw program?
Nothing official. Our town manager takes care of the welfare rolls. And what we did was at the town office, we always kept a few rolls of town bags there. So if he did have somebody come in that really needed the help, he was allowed to give them a roll of bags to get them through. So it was kind of an unofficial thing.
Okay, and last question for you, Dennis. Do you charge for recycling?
No, we charge for things like refrigerators because of the Freon and those type of things. But most of it, no, we charge for demolition waste, commercial tires, and those type of things. But no, we don't charge for recyclables.
Okay, now, Mark, we've got a couple of questions for you, and then it looks like a couple of questions have come in for Joan. First question for you, Mark, where can I get a sticker for my reusable coffee mug?
If you're in Lebanon, stop by, we'll get you one, or send me an email with your address and I'll mail one out to you.
And the next question, Mark, is how do you encourage, or how can we as a group can encourage more companies to adopt no bags? BJ's and Fry Hopper bread stores have been doing this for years.
So what we've done is we've kind of inserted ourselves within the community. I worked directly with the co-op food stores to talk about the impacts of going to a no plastic bag program, what the impacts of that might be. So definitely working with local chambers of commerce and just talking with some of the folks locally about some of these bag options. There are other communities who have passed local ordinances. If I remember correctly, that's not something that's possible in New Hampshire, and I could be wrong. I know last year there was some enabling legislation proposed to allow communities to do that. Barring that, just talking with local business owners and seeing if you can't kind of move that needle. Starting with some champions. Generally speaking, local co-ops are great places to start, great organizations to partner with. As I mentioned, they're generally in line with waste reduction goals that you may have because they've got them as well. And then using them as a partner and then promoting out some of those concepts is a great way to get the ball rolling.
Great. Joan, I think the next few questions are compost related. First one, how do you discourage animals from attacking your compost pile? Skunks, bears, raccoons, etc.
Well, to be honest with you, we really don't discourage them. You know, they do come. It's on a 40-acre pit that our vegetable scraps are housed out. Here at the transfer station, we have not had any trouble at all with the garbage cans, nothing at all. So we've been lucky. Whether that will continue or not, I don't know. But for right now, we've had no problems. So we're going to continue doing what we're doing.
Okay, the next question. Has anyone tried composting with bokashi to speed up the process and be able to use closed containers?
To my knowledge, no. I don't know anybody in the field in my world of people that I know that have tried that. Whether there are people out there using it, maybe, but nobody that I know is using that method.
And then someone asks if in New Hampshire, is there a plan to include meat, dairy, and other things that aren't currently acceptable?
I think that's a really good question. So that if New Hampshire went that route, I'd have to really take a look at what would be involved in the process as far as manpower. Right now, vegetable scraps are pretty easy to handle. It doesn't require a whole lot of work to do. But if we added meat and dairy, I think I'd have to take a look at that model and really evaluate what it would do for staff time and so forth.
Looks like we have another question for Dennis. Dennis, if you're still there, somebody's asking, what is the cost of a bag in the city of Lancaster?
Okay, down in Lancaster, like I said, we have 3 sizes. The large bag, which is 33 gallons, is $1.50 each. The medium-sized bag are 20 gallons, and those are $1.25 each. And the small bag, which is a 13-gallon bag, is $1 a piece. And most of them we sell by the roll, a roll of 10.
Okay. So I've got a question for each of the speakers, and we'll go in the order in which you presented. So we'll start with Dennis. What would be your top #1 tip to encourage a community to start the program that you discussed?
The #1 tip is the cost savings. It really worked well for the town of Lancaster. I'm not sure on really large cities, but the smaller communities, it's a very, as a taxpayer in town, it's very much a cost saving item. Increases recycling, which is the main purpose of that, is to keep the recyclables out of the landfill. So really it's that.
Okay, and Mark, again, to you, what would be your #1 tip for starting a program that you've discussed?
As was mentioned, I would look to leverage a partner, and focusing on a local food co-op is a great place to start. As we've talked about earlier today, and staffing can be difficult, and finding some local organization that has similar goals to your own is a great way to leverage some of that assistance. It can be really tricky, especially on a reuse type program, to do some data tracking. We just did, some very basic things about pledging. I mean, you could use a pledge card or however you wanted to do it. It's kind of nice to be able to say we had X number of people commit to using a travel mug. This year, because of COVID, it was very truncated. We did focus on water bottles. We've seen and heard a lot of people who are consuming bottled water at home. So that seemed to be a logical step for at least this year to keep the program moving. So I would just say working with a local partner would be a great place to start.
Okay, and Joan, what would be your tip for initiating a compost program?
Well, Paul, I think most importantly, management and staff have to be passionate about the cause. They have to want to be able to get the word out about why taking food scraps out of the trash is so very important. So I think it starts at the top. Your boss and your staff have to all agree that this is a mission that they want to work on. And then education, getting the word out somehow, making it to the point of where you want residents to ask you questions about what's going on, why is this important? So I think it starts at the top and education.
Great. Okay, so we do have a few more questions coming in. Dennis, another question for you regarding bag sales, and you may have touched on this, but the question is, do the bag sales cover the cost of recycling?
It covers the cost of MSW, getting rid of the MSW. It does not, in our budget, if you look at the page there, in our budget, it does not include baling of recyclables. That's under a different budget. What it covers is all the related costs of getting rid of your MSW, which includes, electrical, everything, employees, right down through the line. But the recycling is the baling and stuff is under a different department.
And I guess it could be a situation where if you did want to cover all your costs, you just folded it into the bag fee if the town chose to do that.
Yes, you could adjust your MSW budget on however you wanted, and once you could get everything organized where you would know your expenses for baling and those type of things, and then of course you'd have that revenue to add on to the MSW revenue. So then you'd have a good accurate number.
Okay, I'm going to throw a couple questions out to the entire panel and anybody who would like to chime in. These questions came in prior to the conference. First one is, Chester can't be the only town having a heck of a time with so much cardboard now that everything is delivered. Could someone speak to this question as far as, how do you handle all that additional cardboard? What are the impacts?
I can speak for the town of Hollis. We have so much cardboard now that we have just made arrangements with the trash hauler that our trailer just goes out every 2 weeks. Our cardboard is compacted, and every 2 weeks we're generating almost 10 tons of cardboard. That's an incredible amount of cardboard. And sometimes we don't even make the 2 weeks. But we've just gotten on a schedule now where it's going to be dumped every 2 weeks.
Mark, did you want to mention?
Yeah,
then we'll go to Dennis.
It's very similar to what Joan's talking about. I mean, we recognize that, it just continues to come in, and frankly, it's not a bad thing. It's helping with the revenues because, the cardboard market's been fairly strong, where some of the other markets were not. So for us, the overall picture, because we bale and market our cardboard directly, it's helped with our revenue because of the increased volume. So it can be a pain in the neck because it's more to deal with, but on the other side of things, it can be an increased revenue.
And Dennis, did you have any comment there?
Yeah, of course, I got done at the end of December, but even before that, our cardboard had increased a lot. We have 4 vertical balers, And basically, like Tuesday mornings, they go on to bale cardboard with 2 vertical balers just to get everything done up. If I'm correct, we're sending out about a 22-ton load every 4.5 weeks, which is more than we used to. And there again, like Mark said, with the increase in revenue, that really helps us.
Yeah, and I would just say from our perspective here in northern Vermont, same things that Mark mentioned. Fortunately, the price received for a ton of cardboard has gone up pretty steadily over the last several months, and hopefully that trend will continue. Let's see here. The next question: what can be done to make products with recycled content packaging more visible as better choices for consumers?
That's a toughie.
Mark, looks like you were going to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a tough question because we're a consumer-based society. People are free to make poor choices all day long. I think, Paul, on your signature line, you referenced the cost of producing a plastic spoon, and how very often we opt for disposable items. And I think it's unfortunate. I think this group here understands the impact of some of those poor choices. So I think, it is possible to use some of our local platforms. Maybe your community has a local newspaper, or your community itself does an electronic newsletter to residents. There may be some very small or simple ways that you can get the word out. Again, some of the partnerships we've developed with the local food co-ops with our green shopping initiatives. I really taught some people who thought they knew how to reduce waste. It was quite interesting to show people that some of their choices were not actually all that environmental, but they were responding to very effective greenwashing campaigns. So there are some realities out there that people think they're doing the right thing when in fact they may not be. So some of those hurdles can be difficult to get over, because you may have customers or residents who think I'm doing a good thing by choosing a particular product when there might be something even better available to that customer. So starting with some of the local options, I think are great places to start. I think very often we get jammed up with legislation and ordinances and trying to do all these other regulatory routes, which can help, but we all have some influence in our own corner of the universe that I would encourage everybody to take advantage of.
Dennis?
At our facility, we're a small town, so we'll have people that'll come in and ask the guys and gals, what about this? Is this recyclable? And if it is, they'll explain that it is. If it's not, they'll tell them it has to go in the trash. And hopefully some of those people will say, oh, if that's not recyclable, next time I go to the store, maybe I'll look for something that is. So on a small town.
Joan, did you have anything you wanted to add? Or?
The only thing I would say is, this is a tough one, but for me, what comes home is when people say, well, why can't I recycle that foam coffee cup in with the plastic? That's when the conversation starts. Well, it just doesn't go. Our vendor doesn't take it. So it's kind of those kinds of things at the recycling trays, when people see us pulling this stuff out, that conversations will start, and hopefully they do think twice. I mean, you can go to a lot of your local, well, before COVID, coffee places for drive-through coffee with your own cup. So maybe we'll get back to that, and but that's how we do it here. It's just the small things when they see us pulling stuff out of the recycle trays that we're going to throw away, that they think twice about it.
Yeah, I know Mark mentioned social-based marketing earlier, and I think the tendency for a lot of folks is to do what everybody else is doing. And so the challenge for us is to make what we're doing what everybody is doing, so that people don't want to be left behind by not doing it. So spreading the word, the stickers on the coffee mug, you know, is a constant reminder. Talking to the folks at the facilities, you know, I find that if I can engage people one-on-one with a detailed explanation, you know, I feel like they remember that and they take that information with them. But, you know, depending on the size of the town you're in, you can't engage everybody in a one-on-one conversation. But I think those conversations are invaluable. And, you know, if we can get the people we engage to engage with others, that's how we're going to make significant changes. Next question is regarding strategies for pushing back against the overuse of plastics in packaging. Is anybody aware of any initiatives in that regard?
I think what we've tried in Lebanon is at least starting to address that, you know, by getting people to think about some of the choices that they're making. Plastics, you know, is just so much a part of the conversation right now. At times it can be distracting, frankly. Plastics are not the largest portion of our waste stream, and yet they consume the majority of the conversation. They certainly do have their place in damaging the created world, but we're still not diverting food scraps like we could. We're not doing backyard composting. People still throw away cardboard and paper, which is very easy to recycle right in our region. So I think what plastics, and sometimes I'm afraid of getting lynched for saying this, but I think sometimes plastic has given us the opportunity to make poor choices. Things like recyclable water bottles, you know, single-use recyclable water bottles. People are okay with consuming those because, well, I can recycle this plastic water bottle, but it's not the best choice. Reuse is the best choice, but we don't talk about that very often. We talk about how that plastic water bottle is recyclable. And I think what we need to start doing is having the more difficult conversation and talk to our customers and residents about stop producing and consuming these single-use items. Because what happens is the plastic industry is very effective in letting people know this container is recyclable. And that's completely true. And there are times when that is a very appropriate use of resources. But you know, sitting at my home where I could turn the tap on and fill up a glass of water, but instead I'm using a single-use product to consume water that was probably produced in Wichita, Kansas at a municipal water supply is really just, it's crazy. It makes no sense why we're moving water all over the place. But I think what we need to do is start having the more difficult conversations with our residents and take the opportunity when they're asking, is this recyclable? Yes, but is there a better option? Recycling has allowed us to continue to make poor choices. I'm not saying recycling is bad, but we need to take it a step further.
Another question just came in regarding black plastic. If someone could review, if you would, the issues associated with black plastic, if you have any in your particular programs.
So for us, black plastic is not accepted. And for places that are not accepting it, one of the reasons, so for us, one of the reasons it's not accepted is our plastic vendor has an optical sorter, and the optical sorters don't recognize black plastic because it's the same color as the belt. So black plastic is typically not accepted. The other thing to remember too is, generally speaking, black plastics are like the bottom of the barrel recycled product. it's comparable in my mind to egg cartons, where it's just this mongrel plastic, and that's why it's black, because it's just got so much pigment in it, and that black is the only thing that's left. So using black plastic isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it's providing an outreach or an output rather for other plastics. But there are actually some black plastic recycling options. Right now, a lot of folks are probably wrestling with residents about flower pots. Home Depot takes flower pots back, and those go back through a flower pot manufacturer located right here in the United States. So if you have a Home Depot in your local area and you're combating flower pots in your plastic stream, start letting folks know that those are recyclable at a local Home Depot, and those get moved to domestic markets to make new flower pots. So that's a national program that they don't promote, because I don't know that they want to deal with all the flower pots, but there's an option available. So black plastics are a challenge, but again, I think we get lost in the weeds again with plastics. We're working with our local gardeners and nurseries in this area to try to expand the Home Depot program, because plastics are a reality that we need to do something with. But that's what we're doing here in our area.
Okay, I think we probably have time for one or two more questions. Another question, do any of you know of any initiatives where small towns are working together on recycling? Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, we are a little bit, of course, here again, we're a small town. There's a lot of small towns around us. We do have one town nearby that they don't have any balers. And so we do accept their recyclables as long as they're sorted and only the items that we take. And we tell them that they have to supply us with at least a Gaylord or two of aluminum cans in their recyclables for us to do it with them. And obvious, that's to make it worth our while. So that's what we do.
We do something similar here, as Dennis just mentioned, but we also, because we serve multiple communities here, we actually organize quarterly meetings with our communities and invite them to attend to talk about what Lebanon's doing, to talk about upcoming contracts that they might have that other communities might be able to partner with, and just have an open dialogue 3 or 4 times a year with our neighboring communities.
Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end of this portion, and I'd like to thank all of the speakers, and we'll turn it back over to Heather.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul, Dennis, Mark, and Joan for your presentations. Thank you again for your expertise in the field and knowledge. It's great to share things across the way. At this time, we are going to come up to a 10-minute break. So feel free to stretch your legs and get a snack. We're going to return at 10:45 a.m.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. And before we start talking about recycling safely during COVID-19, I'd like to take you on a brief tour of NRRA's newly redesigned website. We launched our website back in June of 2020, and we have been making improvements and updates during that time. And one of the most important additions to our new website that we're pretty proud of is our resource library. Our resource library is a compilation of over 100 resources relevant to recycling and waste reduction. And it is available to the public, not just NRRA members. And so we want to make sure everyone is aware of it. And I just want to make sure that you all can see my screen, and I'm going to take us through a tour of our resource library to start. So from our homepage, if you click on the resource library, you will see that it includes recorded webinars, resources for acquiring transfer station equipment and products, articles, and videos. And one of the easiest ways to browse our resource library is by topic. While there's a variety of topics that you can filter from the homepage of the resource library, we've also included some of the most popular ones under the resource library navigation view. So, for example, if we start with COVID-19, it will take you to a page that has all of our resources related to the pandemic. So, for example, two very popular ones are our original webinar that we did back in April of 2020 with Dr. Ben Lachlan, who's joining us again this afternoon. And that webinar was watched by, I think it was over 300 people live, and another 300 watched the recording afterwards. So that recording is here and available along with the slides and PowerPoints. If you open up an individual resource, you'll find additional details about that. And here in this case, we have a recording of the webinar, we have the presentation slides, and then we also have some additional questions. And in this case, a summary of the webinar that we included, sort of a mini transcript, if you will. And then some of the other major topics in our resource library, we have one on food waste and composting. And so if you go here, you'll see some recent webinars that delved into that topic. You'll also see some videos related to a grant that we're working on with the City of Keene to increase backyard composting. And then with glass recycling, similarly, you're going to find recent webinars about glass. We actually had an article in Resource Recycling Magazine in January all about our glass programs. And so that type of information is also available here. And then tomorrow, we're actually going to spend a bit of time looking at our glass recycling story map. So I'll just briefly mention it here. But we have put together a really visually appealing story map that has maps and photos and video that talks all about glass recycling, because that is a topic of particular interest to many of our members. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Information sheets is another really great one. These are a collection of valuable company suggestions for transfer station equipment or products and services from companies that don't participate in our cooperative purchasing programs, but are just resources that we want to provide to communities. So if you're wondering what to do with antifreeze, or ideas for contractors who can help take care of your brush and stumps, that's the type of information we have available here. We also have, for those of our solid waste operators in New Hampshire, we have a whole section that shows all of our webinars and video recordings that qualify for New Hampshire DES credit, continuing education credit from the Department of Environmental Services, and instructions for how to get credit for all of these webinar recordings through NRRA. So this is another popular one as well. We also have videos and information about recycling markets. A really great one we did recently is that Heather and I actually led a Recycling 101 class for the New Hampshire Municipal Association. And that was a 3-hour intensive that was really designed for select board members, public works staff, recycling committee members, really anyone who wanted to learn sort of a thorough introduction to recycling and waste reduction in New Hampshire in this case, but a lot of it is generally applicable to other states. And then lastly, as I mentioned earlier this morning, we had a summer webinar series last summer. And for a while after that, all of the recordings from those presentations were available for free only to NRRA members. But on Earth Day of this year, we went ahead and opened that up so that these webinars would be available for free to the public. So again, more resources that we just want to make sure that everyone is aware of. And then another section of our website that's really of interest both to members of ours and non-members alike is our news and events section. So we now have a place for short articles, a blog, if you will, that provides updates about our work and other areas of interest in the world of waste reduction and recycling. And then we also have a calendar of events. And one thing that's nice about this is that you can see what's coming up and even download a calendar invitation to mark something on your calendar. And then we also allow members of NRRA to post to classifieds. So we have a classified section. So if you are a member, you can send us information if you have a job or something that you're looking to sell. And then there's also 4 aspects of our website that I wanted to highlight that are of particular interest to our members. These are member-only benefits, but I just want to make sure that folks are aware of these. The first 2 are actually easily accessed on the homepage of our website. So one is our load request form. And this is a document that allows NRRA members who participate in our cooperative marketing programs to schedule or request cooperative marketing loads. The form is quick and easy to complete either on your computer or your smartphone. And you just have to answer a few questions and submit the form, and then one of our staff will take care of your request. And many of our members do report that this form is a great alternative to calling or emailing, so we encourage you to give it a try and let us know what you think. And then another item that's accessed through our homepage is our member price list. And this is a pricing guide that we issue every month, typically around the 5th of the month. And it's based on several reputable national indexes, as well as real-time average pricing from our various vendors. And this is one of our most popular members-only sections of our website. And you can easily request access to this password-protected section of the website through the website itself. You can create a member account if you haven't already. And then we also have one of the new benefits that we had put together for our members back in March of last year was an email listserv. And this email listserv is a way that we determined we could use to provide members an opportunity to directly connect with one another and share information during what was a really uncertain time at the beginning of the pandemic, as well as beyond the pandemic. And so we developed this email listserv. If you're not familiar with a listserv, it's a method of communicating with a group of people by email. And you simply send an email message to one main email address, and then it's going to automatically send that email to everyone else who's subscribed to the group. So in our case, all of our voting municipal members are invited to join the listserv, and we have over 90 members that participate on this listserv so far. And we encourage you to check it out if you're a member of NRRA. And then one of the last areas that I wanted to point out is actually the newest section of our website that is will be particularly useful for our members who participate in our cooperative marketing. And that is our finance and accounting page. And so this is a place where members can request electronic invoicing. They can request direct deposit for payments. You can print out a blank bill of lading. You can upload actually a completed bill of lading to submit to our finance department. And you can also get answers to common questions that our accounting department receives. And, you know, there's quite a bit more on the website that I'd love to show you. I will just briefly point out that, you know, we have information about membership benefits. We have a really great environmental impact report, which is a nice opportunity. If you have someone, perhaps a resident, who's asking you if recycling is worth it, this page is really a great place to point someone to, because what it shows is that all of the communities participating in our cooperative marketing in 2020 resulted in the equivalent of removing almost 22,000 passenger cars from the road for an entire year. And then it breaks it down by the different commodities. So this is kind of a nice snapshot to show someone that yes, actually recycling is beneficial. And then we also have information, of course, about our cooperative marketing programs, our cooperative purchasing programs, our school recycling club. And then last but definitely not least is that I would encourage anyone to, if you haven't already, to subscribe to our email newsletter, Full of Scrap, because this is a really great way to stay informed about our services, upcoming events, recycling industry news, and more. And Full of Scrap is issued every 2 weeks, and you can sign up easily through the homepage of our website. And now I am pleased, briefly before we move on to our Recycling Safely presentation, I'm pleased to announce the winner of our early bird registration drawing to win a new Think Center Nano computer, courtesy of NRRA's information technology provider, CCI Managed Services. Now, this computer retailed at $745, and it includes the PC, a keyboard, and a mouse. And we were offering this up to people who signed up for our webinar by a certain deadline. Now, I do realize that this photo shows a computer monitor, a very fancy looking computer monitor, and that's not included. But I will assure you that when I put up a photo without the monitor, it really just didn't look very good. So do want to be clear on that. But I am pleased to announce that the winner, who was chosen completely at random from everyone who signed up on time, is NRRA's associate member, Marty O'Brien of Martico Dumpster and H2O Waste Disposal Services. So congratulations, Marty, and thank you for joining us today. And we will be in touch after the conference to arrange to get that PC to you. And now it is time for our next session, Recycling Safely During COVID-19. And I'll be moderating this session. And I am pleased to be welcoming Dr. Ben Lockwin and Bonnie Bethune. And Dr. Ben Lockwin is an expert on infectious disease epidemiology, and he's going to provide national safety updates regarding the pandemic. And Bonnie Bethune, our member services manager at NRRA, will share how municipal recycling programs are adapting their practices during the pandemic. And both of them spoke at our hugely popular webinar on the same topic back in April of 2020. We had a second round in December, and I have to say, I think people will still have a lot of questions for you both today. So thank you for joining us, and Ben, I will let you take it from here.
Thank you, Reagan. Thank you, Bonnie. Can you please send me the link to post my slides?
It looks like your slides are showing.
Can you see that one now?
Yes, looks great.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. So, as mentioned, I would like to, oh, hold on a second. It looks like I have lost them. Are they still showing?
I still see your cover slide, Recycling Safely During COVID-19.
Operator error, I think. Okay. So, welcome everybody for Recycling Safely During COVID-19 as part of the annual conference 2021. And as mentioned, what I would like to cover are the elements. So this will be the third time that I'm speaking with the NRRA group, and it's my pleasure to be here. And I did want to cover first a little bit of the background, as I've done before, to bring everybody up to speed, and then kind of the state of affairs and where things stand right now as far as the pandemic across the Northeast, as well as the nation and globally, and then open it up to questions solicited through the chat, as well as ones that we've previously brought in. So without further ado, I will talk about first the background on SARS-CoV-2, the things that were said last time. And so I'll go over a lot of this information quickly for those who maybe haven't attended an event before. Also, I'll discuss how our knowledge has evolved as well as what's going on within the world of vaccines and the end of the pandemic, and how things are looking as far as safety to go to retail, to go to grocery, to resume some sense of prior normalcy, and then questions and answers. So jumping into it now, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, for those who haven't been a part and maybe haven't seen any news in the past 15 or so months, ultimately, the issue has been about coronaviruses. So this particular coronavirus is a beta coronavirus, and our best estimate is this is derived from a particular species of beta coronavirus that existed in bats and essentially crossed the species border into humans. And this is an enveloped virus. So if you look at this artist's conception picture on the right side, it's got this envelope protein, and protruding off the envelope are these spikes. And those are interesting, especially for the transmission of the virus, which I'll talk about later, as well as developing vaccines for it, which we've got 3 that are now authorized in the United States. Those spike proteins are how the viruses infiltrate our cells and begin their replication and make people sick and then spread to others. And this is an electron micrograph of the SARS-CoV-2 virus and what it looks like. So it's a false color image, but those are pictures of the real SARS-CoV-2 virus. And you can see, because that's an overhead view, that it's more of like a cross section, but you can see the spike proteins sticking off of there. And that's why these are named coronaviruses, because coronavirus, the Latin root corona, is translated into crown. So when these were first identified, they were known as the crown viruses because of the spikes protruding off the top. And then this is an artist's conception, and you can see that there are components there which you can see the inside. This is the RNA code. It's got envelope protein, and then slicing through the shell, it allows you to see the inside as well as the outside. Now, importantly, what we've known for a long time and why our knowledge has had to evolve is because the SARS-CoV-2 virus was, originally something that between November, December 2019 and into January of 2020 was an infectious agent of emerging concern around the world. So there were cases of pneumonia and related respiratory infections that were being reported in China. And, we've had a long history with coronaviruses. We've known about coronaviruses for about 60 years. And importantly, with coronaviruses, they are similar in the way they infiltrate cells. And so these are ones that infect us through typically the upper respiratory tract. And so the idea of surface cleaning has been a lot of symbolic theater. So probably about 15 or so months ago, I had been doing some media reports saying that we shouldn't really be spending a lot of time focusing on doing undue surface cleaning for a virus where we've not had one confirmed case to be due to a surface transmission event. Instead, the coronaviruses are very fragile because they have a lipid bilayer. And so this lipid bilayer is the envelope from which the spikes protrude. And so these are very susceptible to surfactants, which a surfactant is basically what that means. It's a surface active agent. So it's detergents, it's soaps. These degrade the fatty bilayer of the envelope, and alcohols similarly will act to dissolve this and desiccate the viral particles. So these viruses are actually quite fragile. So what they do is they infect in the upper respiratory tract. So usually they'll be inhaled through the oral cavity or through the nasal cavity, and they'll lodge in the pharynx, the back of the throat, the upper respiratory tract. And this is also why when we do nasopharyngeal swabs, if you've gone in for a COVID-19 test, we do the swabbing in the back of the throat, and it's basically to try to pick up mRNA material from the viral particles from where they've lodged in the back of the throat. There's a receptor that's in great supply in the nasal lamina. So the nasal lamina is basically in the back of your nasal cavity, in the back of the throat. The soft tissue lining there, we have these particular receptors that love to be docked by the COVID-19 virus, basically. And there's something called ACE2, which is angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptors. And that's how this particular coronavirus binds to the surface of cells. And so we do know quite a bit about how the SARS-CoV-2 virus is attaching to us, how it's gaining entry into cells. And from there, then, we've been able to develop some therapeutics that help modulate the infection, and more importantly, develop vaccines to prevent future infections, which is also going to allow us to end the pandemic eventually. So the big four continue to be, most importantly, the preventive means of the pandemic are in this order: distancing. And I wanted to make the note again that 6 feet isn't necessarily the best. So we've got tape lines everywhere in the world now. Typically they're generated about 6 feet out. But as I've said in the past, we've successfully recovered viral particles from people sneezing and coughing and talking in a room from 27 feet away and greater. So the whole idea of 6 feet is really sort of old-fashioned dogma and doesn't really have a lot of basis in physics or reality. But what is true is that distancing matters, because if you imagine, if you expand the distance between two people to an arbitrarily large amount of space, so maybe it's 50 feet, maybe it's 100 feet, you eventually get to the point where it becomes impossible to transmit an infection. And that's the case for the most part if you're nowhere near somebody outside, because there's infinite volumes of fresh air. And so coupled with that, the idea of ventilation matters. This is why outdoors tends to beat indoors. And so also think about, let's say within your facility, or if you go out somewhere shopping or for grocery, whatever, it's all about air changes per hour, and that's the acronym ACH. And the idea is in a volume of space, you would like at least 6 air changes per hour. And so what that essentially means is that the volume of air probabilistically has a likelihood of being totally removed, replaced with different air 6 times or more in the course of an hour. Now, indoors, in a lot of spaces, a lot of homes, the ACH is a half, maybe a quarter or less. So there are very few air changes. And this is also why indoor presents a different risk than outdoor does, because people end up sharing these volumes of air with aerosolized particles, respiratory droplets. And so then we couple that with masking, as you know, and obviously masks only work if they're properly applied, if people comply with mask use. Depending on the sort of mask material, if it's double layered, if it's triple layered, different masks have different levels of efficacy. But you know, the idea is if you're blocking source infection, so somebody who has the SARS-CoV-2 infection, it becomes more difficult for them to transmit respiratory droplets. And if you're wearing a mask and you're staying far enough away and the air is well ventilated, it becomes very difficult for respiratory droplets and aerosols to make it to you. And then in last place, again, is cleaning. So it's always a good idea to have surface hygiene, no question about it. But remember, for respiratory infections, that's sort of the last act of prevention. Now, our incoming head of the CDC, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, she's very, I would say, conservative as far as masks are concerned. You know, in conversations we've had, she, being an infectious disease specialist, is early on, especially January timeframe, she was looking at having the rest of 2021 at least be a mask policy heavy year. So just so you know, that's from a federal perspective where some of that will continue to come from. But one of the things that I've been trying to push for are threshold metrics, basically. So the uptake of vaccines across the population, whether it's initial doses or if it's for a 2-dose series for fully immunized people. At what point do we have enough people vaccinated? And at the same time, we're looking at incidences of new cases, new hospitalizations, new deaths. And then we can say the combination of the approaches is going to allow us to unmask and sort of resume things the way they used to be. So that's still a work in progress, I'll say. I know some of the questions were around that. Now, jumping into the vaccine space in particular, what do we know about the vaccines? Well, we know a lot. So there are several major categories, and you've probably seen and read a lot of news or content about these. These are a couple pictures. One is the mRNA 1273, that's Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. The other one is the Pfizer-BioNTech, also mRNA vaccine. Those are these here, the mRNA vaccines, which were the first two authorized by the FDA via EUA. So that essentially represented at the end of 2020 our first approach at prevention. There's also the class of what are called adenoviral vector vaccines. So the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, or more properly Janssen, because it's made by the Janssen facility in the Netherlands. This one is an adenovirus 26 based vaccine. That's the AD26. That one was authorized in February. And there's another class of vaccine that has done quite well in tests in the UK and the US, and that one is by Novavax. They are a Maryland-based vaccine company, and there's probably going to be a pursuit for an authorization later this month for that one. Now, these were the dates that they were authorized, if you remember. So it was 11 December for Moderna, 18 December for FDA, and then Janssen was 27 February, and they've been supremely effective. So the efficacy rate for these three, respectively, is 95%, 94.1%, and 68%, and they have very strong safety profiles. What I will say about the effectiveness rate, so when we test vaccines in the clinic, we use efficacy. When they're used in public, like they have been since authorization, we use effectiveness. So the difference in terminology of efficacy versus effectiveness, it matters because of using them in the wild introduces a lot of variation. But if you look at those, some of the things that I've heard from the public are, well, why would anybody want the Janssen vaccine? It's only 68% effective. Or, well, if I get one of the other two vaccines and they're about 95% effective, I still have a 5% chance of getting infected. And neither of those are actually true. So the Janssen vaccine has going for it that it's a single dose rather than 2 doses. And how the effectiveness and efficacy work is that a vaccinated person has a 95% lower risk of getting COVID-19 compared with a control group participant who's not vaccinated. So basically the two mRNA vaccines are a couple of the most effective vaccines that we have in the world for anything. So by comparison, the 2-dose measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, the MMR, is 97% effective against measles, and it's 88% effective against mumps. And generally, the seasonal flu vaccines that we take are between 40 to 60% effective. So these are really very effective vaccines. The rollout's still ongoing, as you know. In New Hampshire, there have been 1.28 million doses given, and about a third, so 450,000 people are considered fully immunized. So that's 33% of the population. And then across the United States, there have been 152 million people given at least one dose, and 114.3 million people in the United States are considered fully immunized. So that's 34.8% as of the weekend metrics. Now in the news, there a lot of information had come out, if you had seen it, regarding Janssen's vaccine and the pause in the vaccine, blood clots and other concerns. But what I'll say here is that, so that was unpaused and continues to be used. And what was found and published by a University of Oxford study was that people are actually 8 to 10 times more likely to get a blood clotting event by suffering a COVID-19 infection rather than from a vaccine. So what happened was that there were 6 cases of a particular type of cerebral sinus thrombic event where people had venous blood clots, and all 6 were women, and that was out of 6.8 million doses given. So it ended up being about 1 case of blood clotting per 1.14 million doses administered. So the likely genomic effect, there's a particular genetic disposition that allows this to happen. And it's a particular type of clot too that we've seen from giving heparin to people, which there's this paradoxical effect that can rarely happen. So again, you know, and the blood clot risks for, let's say, smoking and taking birth control were demonstrated to be much higher than that. But the pause was important because we wanted to make sure that there wasn't something going on within the vaccine that was something that was not understood in terms of a mechanism of action that was causing physiological effects that could have increased the risk inordinately rather than having the vaccine benefit people. So that was hence the pause for a couple weeks. And again, it's been resumed and fully in use. Now the supplies for that particular vaccine are dwindling because again, those were manufactured in the Netherlands, and there's a facility in the United States that hasn't yet been FDA approved for manufacturing. So they're not able to distribute theirs yet, but I expect that we'll continue to have more of a supply than we've had in the past with the vaccines. So again, we're about 33 to 35% vaccinated in the region and across the nation right now.
And here's just a 1-minute warning, Dr. Loughlin.
Great. So my last slide, there are basically 8 million metric tons plus minus, which is about 17,600,000,000 pounds of plastic waste that enter the ocean every year. And this equates to 1 garbage truck full of plastic dumped per minute into the ocean. And there's a big reason for concern there. So there's models that predict plastic waste will outweigh fish in the sea by 2050 and bring with it the risk of microplastics. Incineration isn't any better. There's vaporized plastic effluent. And so we've got this pandemic of plastics and microplastics. And so while now we can vaccinate against SARS-CoV-2, we haven't yet found a way to vaccinate the public against recyclable waste and the idea of throwing things away. So the lack of recycling and the use of disposables is really a slow-moving catastrophe. And for this reason, this hard work that you're undergoing is work that occurs on longer time scales. So it's sometimes difficult to see the reward amid the effort, but it's there. And with that, I will undo my screen share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks for providing that context at the end. You're right. We talk about the challenges with solid waste and recycling, and yet we don't always have this acute crisis to sort of drive more public discussion about it. And now we have Bonnie Bethune, who is the Member Services Manager at NRRA. Oh, I think you need to unmute, Bonnie.
All right, looks like I need some help, Heather.
Coming right up.
Okay. There we go. Yes. Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you, Reagan, particularly for your leadership over the last year and for your introduction. And thank you, Dr. Loughlin, for joining us again to share your guidance and expertise. I appreciate that last slide too, like Reagan pointed out, that the hard work that all of us do sometimes doesn't show over the course of a week or a day or a year. I always call it the slow moving train of recycling. So it was nice for you to point that out. Okay, what are we not doing here? Oh, there we go. Let's look at how far we've come. April 2020, some of our recycling facilities were closed. Most remained open as policies were put in place to protect staff and residents from COVID-19. Facilities used protective measures of masks, distancing, stopped some recycling such as cardboard, plastics, and closed the swap shops. On the good note, all of our NRRA markets were accepting material with the exception of our 1 through 7 plastics plant in Pennsylvania, which closed for a number of months. Surprisingly, material was still able to move into Canada. Here's a look at social distancing at Lebanon, New Hampshire recycling facility, just a guideline for our residents as they came in. And I think it just served as a reminder, kind of like masks, reminding us that we're in a pandemic and we need to do things differently. More changes at the beginning of COVID-19. Some recyclables were not accepted at all at recycling facilities. Plastics, cardboard, cans, mixed paper, and some facilities are still not accepting some of those things. There were changed traffic patterns, and any of you who work at a recycling center know that changing any kind of habit for people coming into facilities is a very difficult thing. One person at a time depositing recyclables and trash often led to long lines. The city of Keene mentioned that there were lines way out of their facility all the way down the road, and people were just working with it. Recycling buildings were also not open to residents and offices. April 2020 and forward, as we discussed, best management practices webinar with Dr. Loughlin provided guidance and encouragement in April of 2020. Over 1,000 views. Reagan corrected me. She said it was about 550. So, you know, by the time we get through all of this, maybe we'll be up to 1,000 views. Recycling facilities see an uptick in municipal solid waste and construction and demolition debris. And I've heard this over and over again from our operators that there's just so much material coming in with people cleaning out, having a little bit different kind of time to clean out and bring it to the transfer station. Most residents understand and comply with the new policies, but some have put up resistance, making it a challenge for our operators to keep the daily flow going smoothly. We did an update on best management practices webinar again with Dr. Loughlin in December of 2020. Here's a look at Keene, New Hampshire and their sorting line, and you can see the PPE equipment that they're using, masks, aprons, gloves. April of 2021, all of our facilities are operational. and many at 100% with the exception of swap shops. And some policies remain in place, such as no admittance into buildings and offices, and clearly delineated traffic patterns stay in force. Many facilities continue to use protective masks, but that may be optional for some staff, and continued use of gloves, distancing, and again, keeping those swap shops closed. Here's a look at Sunapee, New Hampshire's traffic flow. This was a picture that our former executive director, Michael Durfour, took and sent me via email just to show what a difference. At a recent member operations marketing meeting, affectionately called our mom meetings, we had a discussion on the 14th of April with David Witham, the director of risk management at Primex. And he met with our group and he gave advice on the recycling facility safety in general, as well as swap shops in particular. One of his quotes was, "Encourage a workplace culture that encourages proactive and socially responsible behavior." Some basic control measures. David reminded the group to recall that we are still in a pandemic even with vaccines. So continue to encourage masks, 6 foot plus distance, even more if you can get away with it. Frequent hand washing, hand sanitizer. If vaccinated, still wear masks. And I liked what he said. He said this is a slow walk back to normalcy. Swap shops. First to close, last to open. Swap shops are a delicate issue for staff to regulate public access to the public facility or to a swap shop within that facility. We hear over and over again that swap shops are a love them, hate them kind of thing, where residents tend to kind of hang out and spend too much time or just kind of taking advantage of it. But it also moves a great deal of material that would otherwise be thrown away. So with this swap shop and COVID-19, communities need to establish regulations and safety rules that staff can refer to and use as a backup if they ever have any issue with a resident. Here's a look at Candia, New Hampshire's swap shop. Obviously a huge dedication to setting items aside that are useful. Here's a look inside, and you can see why distancing would become an issue with people. Even if you had one person at a time, you still would have that particulate factor going on. So when is the right time to open during a pandemic? Swap shops in many cases, like I said, the first things to close and will be the last thing to open due to those small areas or buildings for storing these items and no room for the residents to distance themselves. And swap shops were also closed initially due to that surface contamination concern. David Witham from Primex advised communities to look to the local emergency management entities, the local administration, and the state of New Hampshire Public Health for guidance in reopening swap shops. Reagan mentioned our listserv, and it's proved to be a very interesting way to contact people and to get quick answers to questions. So we posed a question on April 26th. What percentage would you say your facility is back to normal with COVID-19 being a year plus in? Ashland, New Hampshire, which happens to be my hometown, said they were at 100%. Londonderry, Vermont, I don't think we ever dropped below 90% open. The only service that COVID-19 affected was our take it or leave it reuse shed, again, the swap shop. Rollinsford, New Hampshire is 100%, and Francistown, New Hampshire is back to normal with the exception of the swap shop, which remains closed for the foreseeable future. And more answers to that same question. New London, New Hampshire. To accommodate COVID, we started wearing masks, rerouted people, how people entered and used the facility. We shut down the swap shop. Other than that, it was business as usual. At this time, there is no plan to reopen the swap shop, but everything else is now the new normal. So we are at 100% and have been all along. Hooksett, New Hampshire, which is a drop-off facility, has been 100% and then some. And that means their curbside program is no longer in force with single stream recycling. So they started taking more material at their drop-off facility, partly due to COVID, partly due to single stream high pricing. Pelham, New Hampshire is at 100%. Another question was asked by Barrington, New Hampshire, and it is, what is your facility doing now that the New Hampshire governor's mask mandate has expired? Are you implementing your own mask ordinance? And we had 3 answers. Canterbury, New Hampshire will still wear masks. Francistown, New Hampshire is not going to have their own ordinance. And NEK, Lyndonville, Vermont, we still ask people to wear masks, but no other restrictions beyond that. Updated operating plans. One of the things we've learned is that we need to have things in place just in case. Recycling facility operating plans need to have clear contingency plans in case of widespread illness among staff, a future pandemic, or a natural disaster. Here are some sample questions to be thinking about. Who will staff the facility if some or all are out sick? What kind of mutual aid could be depended upon? Do we have the proper PPE and supply? And do we have clear procedures in place for staff and residents? Is this the new normal? Recycling facilities may continue some or all of the following. Contactless payment systems. I know in my own hometown, if we bring in construction debris or a refrigerator, we're actually invoiced for that. The staff does not handle any money. Littleton, New Hampshire uses the Square app or program to accept credit cards. And we're also seeing reduced or full admittance to recycling buildings, offices, or bathroom facilities, and that's site by site. And then traffic patterns to continue distancing. Lessons learned, we are all in this together. Thank you for all you do and continue to stay safe.
Thank you so much, Bonnie.
You're welcome, Reagan.
We have a number of audience questions that have come in, so let's get started with those. And the first few are coming in for Dr. Loughlin. So, some schools in New Hampshire are using 3-foot distancing between students. What is the risk of this, considering that 6 feet may not even be sufficient?
Oops.
Good question. So I think the issue is that more close proximity is more risk, and that's always been the case. So if you get from, like I said, the initial viral recovery studies that we have at 27 feet and say, well, if I can recover this virus and infect somebody 27 feet away, why is 6 feet a thing? Or why is 3 feet a thing? The changes in the guidance from 6 feet to 3 feet were more politically motivated and generated than anything. And I would say the reality, though, like even with the 6 feet in schools, is that when kids had returned to school, and I realized that a lot of school areas, different districts, different states, I mean, everybody's handling it differently, and that's why it's a mess. But it was never handled in such a way that there was really solid, consistent evidence provided to give good guidance. And that put teachers in a hard spot. It put families in a hard spot. And, you know, the short story is kids never will stay 6 feet apart, even when it was 6 feet. And in schools that I've worked with, which have been in many states, you know, redesigning classrooms into parabolic layouts so that kids aren't projecting towards one another, trying to keep them apart for bathroom breaks or snack breaks or anything, depending on the age, you know, distancing is virtually impossible. And so you've got to rely more on the ventilation, filtration of air, like with a MERV 13 filter, like we've talked about before, and masking so that you've got this defense in layers. You know, the idea is this analogy of Swiss cheese where every layer of preventive measure has holes in it. They're not foolproof, but when you start stacking them up serially, they start to make it almost impossible for transmission to occur. So when you add good ventilation and air filtration with masks, with distancing, with cleanliness, and you put it all together, it becomes very hard for somebody to transmit an infection. And that's what we've seen in a lot of schools, you know, trying to capture the metrics for infections by classroom, how many are spreading, doing case tracing if there was one, did it go anywhere else? A lot of the preventive measures have been incredibly successful. I would say, you know, in general, the context of age and its relationship to risk matters a lot, though. So the only real good study that existed was out of South Korea, and it was about 64,000 kids looking at transmission of SARS-CoV-2 virus, and kids were seen to be about half as likely as adults to transmit. Some other maybe less methodologically scrutinous information, you know, maybe overturn some of that, but the point is whether or not kids are less likely to transmit, they're certainly at spectacularly low risk of COVID-19. Massachusetts, for example, just had reported that they had 0 COVID-19 deaths in young children since the pandemic began. And so that doesn't mean that kids weren't getting sick, whether they were asymptomatic, whether they were symptomatic with a runny nose for a day, you know, chest cold sorts of symptoms. They certainly didn't suffer the severe emergent cases, hospitalizations that adults did and those with comorbidities. So I think it's always been a balance between risk and benefit. There's a huge risk with keeping kids out of school as far as their developmental health. You know, there have been some kids that have preferred to be out of school. Sometimes, I guess, tongue in cheek, because they can live their life on Zoom and they don't have to be back in the school system. But there are also kids who are maybe more socially introverted, and it's been maybe a more positive experience. But I think in general, where the American Academy of Pediatrics stands, the American Psychiatric Association, having kids in school in the social construct is much more important and powerful than the almost nil risk of COVID-19 that they could suffer. So I think a lot of it's recalibrating the public on perception of risk. You know, the kids probably should never have been out of school in the first place. And that was why eventually Walensky from CDC and others had said, you know, schools should be the last places closed and the first places opened if we're going to do anything. You know, if we've shut down every retail outlet, every grocery store, every gas station, only then should a school be closed. And again, once things reopen, the first thing to reopen should be the schools, because also the kids being in school facilitates the parents being able to continue working. So kind of the entire economy is this interconnected nexus. And you know what? There's not really been much of a concern about other risk categories in the past with kids. The risk of influenza, and influenza, by the way, was the cause of 4 of the last 5 pandemics we've had over the past century. So the influenza killed far more children 2 years ago than COVID has. And so, you know, the idea of, if we never cared really about flu before, and most parents wouldn't vaccinate their kids against the flu, didn't think it was an issue, they never worried about pneumonia, didn't worry about strep, and all of a sudden, you know, there's a big concern about not letting kids be back in school. I think it's because the risk perception calculus has been overturned in the past year.
Oh, that's so interesting. Thank you. Now we have another question for Dr. Laughlin. It seems the virus is becoming endemic given variants and vaccine hesitancy, which means new strategies to protect those most vulnerable given data collected. How do you see this playing out in the next 2 to 5 years? Reading your crystal ball.
Yeah, I think regarding the endemicity of it, I think we should be all more comfortable living with coronaviruses. So whether or not it surprises folks, in the past, every year, fall, winter timeframe, kind of when everybody seems to get sick, about 10, sometimes 15% of cases that present to the emergency room or clinics with head colds, coughs, can't breathe, you know, this sort of thing, those have been due to other coronaviruses. So SARS-CoV-2 isn't the first one that we've seen, and it certainly won't be the last. It's really kind of an unspectacular virus. It's not very mysterious or surprising as much as the news would like you to think. And there are other much more frightening viruses out there that I would lose sleep over. And so I would say we've been living with coronaviruses, and the more we're exposed to this one, people get immune. We immunize people as well through our vaccination campaigns. We will find ourselves at a point where they continue to genetically shift, and so we'll see more variants, which may be more resistant to the vaccines. So even though you've been immunized, you can still be infected with it. And that's okay, that's what happens. That's why we have different flu shots every year. And typically those are trivalent or quadrivalent, so they have 3 or 4 different types of flu strains in the flu vaccine every year. So as we do this annually, kind of the ongoing exposure to them makes them more of a background noise. The more people that get vaccinated makes it less likely that they propagate through to the most vulnerable people. And then I think, you know, what we're doing is creating also combination vaccines right now, which include flu plus COVID. So there'll be these, you know, right now they're aiming towards like September. That's probably in my mind kind of early if I use the crystal ball, but the idea basically would be, you know, this fall, winter, and also next year, as we create the annual flu booster shots, we'll have a combo vaccine that includes the latest coronavirus variant in it. And so there could be an ongoing booster program, but you know, the reality is that it's going to be immunity that we start to build by people who've been infected and recover, people who've been immunized, and also kind of recalibrating again the public's perception of risk thresholds.
Got it. Now, here's another one. Why is it that some people have such negative side effects to the vaccine? For employers, not knowing in advance what someone's reaction will be, that can be problematic from a staffing perspective.
Yeah, so I don't know if everybody's kept up with what OSHA has said recently, but my reading of it is basically, and don't go web searching it now in the midst of this because this is much more interesting, but there was a question about if an employer mandates a COVID vaccine and you have some side effect or adverse event where you're out of work for a day or 2 days or a week or something, is your employer responsible for workman's comp? And the answer from OSHA was yes, because if it was mandated by the employer, then it's the employer's responsibility any effects that are suffered from it. So what that's done from the contract workspace has kind of made it more difficult, because now big employers and big users of contract work are saying, well, maybe then we won't require the vaccine, we'll just recommend it, because we don't want to be responsible for paying workers' comp or extra time for people to have time off. To the original source question, though, it's really the interactive effect of the vaccine and the recipient's immunity, basically. So within all the vaccines that exist, the Janssen vaccine, the Pfizer, BioNTech, and the Moderna vaccine, they have either this adenoviral vector where we take an adenovirus, it's basically a common cold virus. So another type of illness that we get, a cold, is an adenovirus. We take these, they're very well characterized, and they're made replication defective, and that means they can't cause a cold anymore. So now you've got these replication defective cold viruses, and inside those you put the genetic material for the spike protein for SARS-CoV-2. When you inject it into somebody in the shot, the adenovirus then is basically attaching to the cell and deploying the contents. And though the adenovirus can't now replicate and cause a cold, it can introduce this material into your cells. And so you're building an antibody response against the spike protein for the COVID-19 virus. And between basically the deployment of that, or in the mRNA case, it's the messenger RNA from the spike protein that's surrounded by a lipid nanoparticle shell, and your cells are basically absorbing this and using the mRNA to produce the spike protein. The short story is it's eliciting an immune response, and all the vaccines have what's called an adjuvant, which is something that is used in a vaccine to increase your immune response so that your body just doesn't clear it out too quickly, because you actually want it to stay there for a little while so that your body recognizes there's a problem and builds an immune response to this. And so between the antigen proteins, the adjuvant, it's designed to cause this reaction, and the effects being so heterogeneous, so some people is quite severe, some people don't know they had it at all, is really down to how your immune system reacts. So it's a lot of genetics, but there is an age factor. I've known many, I would say on the order of more than 100 plus minus people who are in the 60, 70, 80s category. And as you get older in that group, they've had fewer to almost no effects from the vaccines, and not always true. But that's also kind of known, because as we get older, our immune system is less likely to jump on something and cause a strong immune reaction, generally just due to age. And this is also why there's an older individual's version of the flu vaccine. So depending on your age range, if you go in for a flu shot, there's one that's made for people 65 and older, which is either double the antigen or it has more adjuvant. So the point is knowing that if you're older, your immune system is going to react less aggressively. This flu vaccine is designed to cause your immune system to act more aggressively so that you build up an immunity to the flu and it doesn't just disappear.
Got it, thanks. We've got a few more great questions in here that I want to get to. One is from someone who says, my workplace is no longer requiring mask usage indoors by the public or employees. The majority of employees have been vaccinated, but you're unsure of the vaccination status of the general public that will be entering. Is it safe to go without a mask?
Yeah. The right answer is safe is a relative word. And so, and I hate to be so equivocal about it, but that's sort of the reality. So I guess it depends on your predisposition and how you measure your own risk. Would I, having been vaccinated, go without a mask in that case? I would say yes. I've been telling a lot of people that if they've been vaccinated, they should basically pursue everything they would want to as though this whole situation never happened. Because once you've been immunized, assuming you've given it, if it's the 2 dose, you've had the 2nd dose and then you wait 2 weeks out, or if it's Janssen's and it's 1 dose and you wait 2 weeks out, because it takes a couple weeks to build up your antibody response. That's as safe as you're ever going to be, because again, the variants will continue to vary. And so for what's circulating now, you'll never be more immune than a couple weeks after your immunizing dose. So you might as well go back to doing whatever it is you want to do, provided your workplace allows it, provided the place you go to doesn't say mask required, but you've now been immunized. So again, like I said earlier, these are some of the most effective vaccines we have, and we do measles, mumps, rubella, tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis, Hib, HPV, and across all these vaccines, there's always what's called a primary vaccine failure rate, which is, the vaccine's not 100% effective. So none of them are. So I would say consider to immunize. It does matter if you had 1 dose of Janssen, it's generally less effective than the 2-dose mRNA vaccines. But I mean, again, they're very potent. And so, yeah, again, it depends on your own personal risk calculus, but what it basically means is you're 95% less likely than anybody else in the population to get infected if you've been exposed to somebody who is infectious.
Well, I appreciate you being candid with that response, because of course, what we're hearing from the CDC is still quite a bit of caution around being masked even after getting the vaccine. So it sounds like what you're giving us is perhaps a more practical answer.
Yeah, and my concern is, the CDC has been good for the past, most of the past year. They got some things wrong, and that's to be expected with ongoing emergent science. They focused way too long on the surface cleaning thing, not enough on making sure the respiratory transmission routes were addressed. And to me, this is another one where the science already exists and they're kind of lagging in that they don't have an end game to the strategy. So is it less risk to vaccinate and then mask? Well, sure, because now you've added another layer of Swiss cheese, which is even a better layer than ever existed with the other ones. But it goes back to calibration. We've never lived risk-free. I would have a much harder time with, let's say, a case of the measles than I would with a case of COVID-19. And I don't not go to, because there was a measles outbreak at Disneyland years ago, if you remember. And I mean, the point is, I don't avoid going anywhere because there might be measles that's circulating because I've been vaccinated. And the measles vaccine has kind of the same primary failure rate, plus the one we got was decades and decades ago. So its effect is going to wane over time too. So, I mean, as a proxy, yeah, it's only an analogy, but the point is, once you've been immunized, you could add layers to make things more bulletproof, but at some point you still have to live. And the vaccination, they're incredibly effective vaccines. And so to get it and then not allow the vaccine to do its job, i.e. making you immune, and still relying on other things is going against what the point of vaccinology is all about. Because then there's no end game at the CDC for, well, okay, so then at what point do we tell people to unmask? Is it December? Is it 2024? Do we wait till 2030? I mean, we could find viruses forever, so nobody could ever leave their house.
Right. Now, we have 3 questions left, and I think, well, maybe not the first one. I think the second 2 can be answered very quickly. So let's see if we can rapid fire through the 3 just to get responses for our attendees. So the first one, should workers at transfer stations be required to be vaccinated?
Require? Oh, that's hard. Well, federally, you can't require vaccines unless it's been approved. And right now, the 3 vaccine candidates are authorized for use and not FDA approved. So that would never legally stand up. But Pfizer-BioNTech has submitted their paperwork as of Friday last week to seek full approval of their vaccine so that it's not called authorized anymore, it's approved. And you could, theoretically, on an approved vaccine, mandate it. Then the question, should you? I mean, here's the other part about it. People complain about vaccine passports. We've had vaccine passports in the past. It's not that I necessarily love the idea or even support it, but it's existed, so it's not some crazy new thing. I think about what's the risk benefit, and if you are working age, so 20s and older, I would say that the benefits of being immunized outweigh the risks. Like I mentioned before, there's fewer cases of blood clots in COVID immunized people relative to people who have had COVID and then suffered other effects, which could include hypercoagulability. There's long COVID stories, et cetera. So, in general, it makes a lot of sense. Not maybe probably for people under 20 at the moment. There's not enough good data on that. It's still very safe, but cases in teens and younger children of COVID have been really unspectacular. So I don't know that I would necessarily immunize all the kids when they don't have a problem with SARS-CoV-2 anyway. But if you think about it, we've always required people to get vaccinated to enter schools too, or universities, or for certain types of jobs like healthcare jobs. So it should be, you could look at it as no different. If you're going to require kids get tetanus shots and measles shots, then why not a COVID vaccine?
Okay. Yes or no? Is it true that there has been a great reduction in flu cases nationally?
True. And I guess the almost still lightning round answer is, and that's even in the context, and we've measured 6 times more than we ever have with flu testing. So I've heard some people say, well, it's only because we're calling everything COVID now. And that's not true. Because a lot of clinics, if you come in and you say I don't feel well, they were doing a rapid duo. So you get a COVID test and a flu test. So we ran 6 times more flu tests than we ever have before in the last sickness year. And virtually none of the cases were flu.
Great. All right, last question. In a swap shop, will the use of fans help the air change to make it safer, as a safer environment?
Yes, only insofar as you allow the air to be exchanged, though. So if you've got exhaust fans in one door or window sucking outside, and on the other side, you've got some drawing fresh air in, so you've got cross flow, so you've got ACHs. If you just turn a fan on, the whole idea of air changes per hour is still basically 0. So you're just blowing around the same dirty air.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Loughlin and Bonnie, for your time and your expertise and sharing that with us today. So that wraps up day 1 of NRRA's Recycling with Results Conference. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Thank you.